when a slap across the face in a Seoul café exposes the wife of a crime lord. Tonight, you're about to witness what happens when a Nigerian woman running from a $43 million fraud scheme discovers her quiet Korean husband isn't who she thought he was. Before we dive in, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the globe. Now, let me take you to a rainy night in Seoul, where one act of violence will ignite a war that spans 3 continents and destroy everything 2 people tried to build together. The rain hammered Seoul like it had something personal against the city. Naomi Vale pressed her forehead against the cafe window, watching water sheet down the glass in twisted rivers that blurred the neon signs across the street into abstract smears of pink and blue. Her coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She didn't care. The bitterness in her mouth had nothing to do with caffeine anyway. 18 months. 18 months of breathing easier, sleeping without a knife under the pillow, walking down streets without checking reflections in shop windows. 18 months of pretending she was someone new, someone unremarkable, someone who hadn't stolen evidence that could topple financial empires and ruin powerful men. Across the tiny table, Jae Min Kong turned another page of his book without looking up. He always read like that, completely absorbed, oblivious to the world dissolving around him. His wire-rimmed glasses caught the overhead light. His fingers, long and precise, held the paperback with the kind of care most people reserved for living things. Everything about him whispered safety. Boring, predictable, harmless safety. That's what she'd needed. That's what the fake marriage visa had bought her. The cafe itself was nothing special, one of 1,000 cramped establishments squeezed between Seoul's endless high-rises, the kind of place that survived on cheap coffee and cheaper pastries served to students too broke to study anywhere else. A flickering fluorescent tube buzzed overhead. The air smelled like burnt espresso and damp wool coats. 4 other customers hunched over laptops, earbuds in, existing in their own private universes. Naomi checked her phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. No messages, no alerts, nothing that suggested the carefully constructed walls of her new life were cracking. She was paranoid. She knew that. Dr. Kim had told her as much during their last session, speaking in that measured tone therapists used when they wanted you to arrive at conclusions on your own. Hypervigilance is normal after trauma, Naomi. But you're safe here. You've done everything right. Except she hadn't done everything right. She'd left bodies behind. Not literal corpses, but close enough. Ruined careers, destroyed families, people who'd trusted her and paid the price when Damian Mercer's lawyers came hunting. She'd taken the evidence and run, leaving everyone else to face the consequences. The cafe door opened with the electronic chime that sounded like wind chimes made of broken glass. A man stepped inside, shaking rain from his charcoal overcoat like a dog after a swim. Expensive fabric, tailored fit, the kind of coat that costs more than most people in this neighborhood earned in a month. He scanned the room with the casual confidence of someone used to owning every space they entered. Naomi's stomach dropped through the floor. Damian Mercer smiled at her across 20 feet of cheap linoleum, and the last 18 months evaporated like they'd never existed. He looked exactly the same. Salt and pepper hair styled with the precision of someone who understood that appearance was power. Sharp cheekbones that fashion magazines would call distinguished. Eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, warm and friendly and utterly devoid of humanity if you knew what to look for beneath the performance. She knew. She'd worked for him for 2 years before she understood what he really was. Naomi's hand went to her phone automatically, fingers hovering over the emergency contact she'd programmed but never used. Her mouth had gone dry. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to punch through bone and run away without her. Damian crossed the cafe in smooth, unhurried steps. His leather shoes clicked against the floor with metronomic precision. Nobody looked up. Why would they? He looked like a businessman grabbing coffee on his way home. Harmless, civilized. She'd thought the same thing once. Naomi. His voice carried the same warm baritone she remembered from Lagos, the voice he used in boardrooms and charity galas, the one that made investors feel clever for trusting him with their money. It's been too long. She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up completely, muscles locked tight around words that wouldn't come. Across the table, Jae Min finally looked up from his book, expression mildly curious, like someone had interrupted his reading with a question about the weather. "I'm sorry," Jamin said in careful accented English. "Do we know you?" Damien ignored him completely. His smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. The real thing, the predator that lived beneath the expensive suits and practiced charm. "We need to talk, Naomi. I think you know why I'm here." "I don't know what you're talking about." The words came out strangled, barely audible. She could hear the fear in her own voice, the tremor that betrayed everything she wanted to project. Stay calm, stay cold, don't let him see. Too late for that. The encrypted files. Damien pulled out the chair beside her and sat down without invitation, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive that probably had a French name she couldn't pronounce. "The evidence you stole from the Lagos office. The backups you made before you disappeared. I need them back, Naomi. All of them." Jamin cleared his throat quietly. "Sir, I think you should leave." The dismissiveness in Damien's glance could have curdled milk. He assessed Jamin for maybe 2 seconds. Thin build, wire-rimmed glasses, paperback novel still open in his hands, and clearly found nothing worth his concern. "This is a private conversation. Mind your own business." "She is my business." Jamin's voice remained soft, almost apologetic. "She's my wife." For the first time, something like genuine amusement crossed Damien's face. "Your wife." He drew out the word like he was tasting wine. "That's precious." "Really? Did she tell you how we know each other? Did she mention the $70 million in pension funds she helped me access? Or the part where she developed cold feet and decided to play hero?" "It was $43 million, Naomi whispered. "And you stole it. I documented it." Semantics. Damien leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed, like they were discussing the weather instead of financial crimes that had destroyed hundreds of lives. "Here's what's going to happen, Naomi. You're going to give me every copy of that documentation, every hard drive, every cloud backup, every encrypted file you've been sitting on for the last year and a half. And then we're going to part ways as friends. And if I don't?" The smile finally dropped. What replaced it was worse. Not anger exactly, but something colder, mechanical. "Then I stopped being polite about this." She said no. Jamin closed his book carefully, marking his page with a receipt before setting it on the table. "Please leave." Damien's laugh was genuine this time, bright and sharp. "Or what? You'll ask me again? Maybe say please in Korean this time?" He moved fast. One moment he was sitting, relaxed and conversational. The next, his hand was around Naomi's wrist, fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. She tried to pull away, but his grip was iron, and suddenly his face was inches from hers, all pretense of civility stripped away. "Listen to me very carefully," he hissed. "I have people in this city. I have lawyers who will bury you in litigation until you're begging to give me what I want. I have investigators who will trace every movement you've made since Lagos. And if you think hiding behind a fake marriage to some Korean nobody is going to protect you..." The slap came out of nowhere. Naomi's head snapped sideways hard enough to make her vision white out. The crack of palm against cheek echoed through the café like a gunshot. Pain bloomed across her face, hot and immediate. And for a moment she couldn't process anything except the ringing in her ears and the copper taste of blood where she'd bitten her tongue. The café went completely silent. Laptop keys stopped clicking. Quiet conversations died mid-sentence. Even the fluorescent buzz seemed to fade into shocked stillness. Naomi blinked tears from her eyes and saw the other customers frozen in place, staring but not moving, not intervening, the way strangers always did when violence happened in public spaces. Shocked, afraid, unwilling to get involved. Except Jamin. He stood slowly. No rush, no sudden movements. Just a gradual unfolding of his thin frame as he rose from his chair and faced Damien across the small table. His face showed nothing, not anger, not fear, not even surprise, just blank, neutral stillness. Damien released Naomi's wrist and straightened, clearly annoyed but not particularly worried. "Sit down before you embarrass yourself." Jamin didn't sit down, didn't speak, didn't do anything except stand there, hands loose at his sides, expressionless behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Something changed in the room. Naomi felt it first as a prickling awareness along her spine, the kind of instinct that made prey animals freeze when predators passed nearby. Then she noticed the other customers. They'd been staring at the confrontation seconds ago. Now they were very deliberately looking anywhere else, at their screens, at the floor, at the rain-streaked windows. Anywhere except at Jae-min. One woman gathered her things and left without finishing her coffee. Damien noticed it too. His confident smile flickered just for a moment, replaced by something that might have been confusion. What, you think standing up makes you intimidating? You're 140 pounds soaking wet, friend. Sit down. Jae-min still didn't speak, but he tilted his head slightly, the way someone might when studying an insect they were about to crush. And that's when Naomi saw it. The thing she'd missed for 18 months, because she'd been so desperate for safety that she'd only seen what she wanted to see. Her husband wasn't harmless. He'd just been choosing to be. Naomi. Jae-min's voice remained soft, almost gentle. Go outside. Wait for me. She should have moved, should have grabbed her coat and run. But her body wouldn't cooperate, frozen by the realization that she'd married a stranger, and the stranger was currently staring down a man who'd terrorized her for 18 months without showing even a flicker of fear. I said sit. Damien reached for Jae-min's shoulder. What happened next took maybe 3 seconds, but Naomi's brain processed it in fragments, like photographs scattered on a table. Jae-min's hand came up in a blur of motion, not a punch, something else, something precise that caught Damien's reaching arm and twisted. Bone popped. Damien gasped, suddenly bent forward at an unnatural angle. Jae-min's other hand appeared at the back of Damien's neck, applying pressure to something that made the taller man's knees buckle. Then Jae-min leaned close and whispered something in Damien's ear too quiet for anyone else to hear. Whatever he said drained the color from Damien's face. Jae-min released him. Damien staggered backward, cradling his arm, eyes wide with something Naomi had never seen there before. Genuine fear. Not the posturing kind people faked in negotiations. Real animal terror. You have 10 seconds, Jae-min said quietly. Use them. Damien ran. He crashed through the cafe door hard enough to make the glass rattle, stumbled into the rain-soaked street, and kept going without looking back. His expensive coat flapped behind him like broken wings as he disappeared into the neon-blurred darkness. The cafe remained silent for another 5 seconds. Then conversation slowly resumed. Laptop keys started clicking again. The woman at the counter went back to wiping down the espresso machine. Life continued like nothing had happened, like they'd all collectively agreed that whatever they'd witnessed was none of their business. Jae-min sat down and picked up his book, finding his page with the same calm precision he used for everything. His hands weren't shaking. His breathing hadn't changed. He looked exactly like the quiet bookstore owner she'd married, except now Naomi could see the cracks in the performance, the places where something else showed through. Jae-min, her voice came out hoarse. What did you say to him? He looked up at her over his wire-rimmed glasses, and for just a moment she saw something ancient and tired in his eyes. Not the eyes of a 32-year-old man who sold books and made coffee, but someone much older, someone who'd seen things she couldn't imagine and done worse. I told him the truth, Jae-min said softly. I told him my family name, and I told him that if he ever touched you again, they would never find enough pieces to bury. The rain kept falling outside. Seoul's neon signs kept blurring into each other through the rain-streaked windows. Inside the cafe, Naomi sat across from her husband and realized she'd fled from one dangerous man straight into the arms of another. The only difference was this one had just chosen her side, and she had absolutely no idea what that meant. They walked back to the bookstore in silence, Naomi's hand tucked into the crook of Jae-min's elbow, more for balance than affection. Her face still throbbed where Damien had struck her. She could feel it swelling, hot and tender, probably already bruising. Tomorrow she'd have to explain the mark to students at the language academy where she taught English to bored teenagers. Tonight, she had more immediate concerns, like the fact that her husband had just threatened to dismember someone with the casual authority of someone who'd done it before. The bookstore occupied the ground floor of a narrow building wedged between a convenience store and a pharmacy in a neighborhood that probably had a name, but everybody just called Near Hongdae Station. 3 stories of books crammed floor to ceiling, the kind of organized chaos that only made sense if you'd built the collection yourself over years. Worn hardcovers in English and Korean mixed with cheap paperbacks, academic texts. No one wanted any more sitting next to manga volumes and poetry collections gathering dust. Their apartment was upstairs. One bedroom, kitchen the size of a closet, living room that doubled as storage for book overflow. Exactly the kind of cramped Seoul living space that foreign teachers complained about and locals considered normal. Jaemin unlocked the door and held it open for her, still silent, still impossibly calm. The fluorescent hallway light hummed overhead as Naomi climbed the stairs, each step feeling like it took enormous effort. Her legs had gone shaky with delayed shock. Her hands were trembling. Now that the immediate danger had passed, her body was finally catching up to what had happened, flooding her system with adrenaline that had nowhere to go. Inside the apartment, Jaemin went straight to the kitchen. Naomi heard the freezer open, ice cubes cracking free from a tray. He returned with a dish towel wrapped around a makeshift ice pack and handed it to her without meeting her eyes. "For your face," he said quietly. She pressed the cold bundle against her swelling cheek and tried to organize her thoughts into something coherent. Words kept sliding away from her, replaced by the memory of Damien's hand around her wrist, the crack of his palm against her face, the way Jaemin had moved. So fast, so precise, like violence was a language he spoke fluently, but rarely bothered using. "Sit down," Jaemin said, not unkindly. "We should talk." "You think?" The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with hysteria she hadn't realized was building. "My ex-boss just found me after 18 months, slapped me in public, and my husband, my fake husband, who I married for a visa, just threatened to murder him in pieces. So yeah, Jaemin, I think we should probably talk." He winced slightly at her tone but didn't defend himself. Instead, he sank into the worn armchair by the window, his reading chair where he spent most evenings with a book and weak tea, and finally removed his glasses. Without them, he looked younger, more vulnerable. Or maybe that was another performance too, another mask in an endless collection. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you before." "Told me what?" "That you're secretly some kind of..." "What? Mob enforcer, gangster, serial killer who happens to enjoy literature?" "Nothing that dramatic." He set his glasses on the side table carefully, precisely. "My family, we're complicated." "Complicated?" Naomi laughed, and it came out wrong, cracked and broken. "Complicated is having in-laws who don't like you. Complicated is cultural differences and language barriers. What you did to Damien wasn't complicated. That was..." She couldn't find words for what it had been. Efficient, professional, terrifying. Jaemin was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "My grandmother runs a business in Seoul, has for 40 years. It's not entirely legal, and my father, before he retired, he was her primary..." He paused, searching for the English word. "Operator. The person who handled problems that couldn't be handled through normal channels." The ice pack had started to numb her face. Naomi lowered it and forced herself to look directly at him. "What kind of problems?" "The kind that required someone who understood violence." His voice remained steady, matter-of-fact, like he was describing weather patterns. "I grew up in that world. Trained in it. Expected to inherit my father's position when he stepped down. And I was good at it. Very good." "So what happened? You just decided to quit and sell books instead?" "More or less." He smiled slightly, but there was no humor in it. "I told my family I was done, that I wanted something different. My father called me a coward. My grandmother called me worse, but she let me go because I'm her grandson and she loves me, even though she thinks I'm wasting my potential shelving novels and making coffee for students." Naomi processed this information slowly, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. And the marriage was supposed to be exactly what we agreed it would be. Convenient, transactional. You needed papers to stay in Korea legally. I needed... He trailed off, shrugged. "I don't know. To prove to myself I could be normal, that I could have a normal life with normal problems, rent and utilities and wondering if the upstairs neighbors are too loud. Except we're not normal." "No," Jaemin agreed quietly. "We're not." The apartment was silent except for the muffled sounds of Seoul through the windows. Traffic, distant voices, the eternal urban hum that never quite stopped. Naomi's head hurt. Her face hurt. Everything hurt, including parts of her psyche she'd thought were healing. He's not going to stop, she said finally. Damien, you scared him tonight, but he's not going to just disappear. He'll come back with lawyers, investigators, leverage. He'll dig into your family, into us. And when he figures out I have the evidence he's looking for— Do you? Jamin interrupted. Still have it? She hesitated. This was the moment, the point where she either trusted him completely or kept running alone. Yes. Where? Safe. Hidden. I have copies in 3 different locations, encrypted 6 ways to Sunday, and access codes that exist nowhere except in my head. She'd spent months setting up the redundancies, paranoid and thorough, making absolutely certain that even if Damien's people found one backup, they'd never find them all. Its financial records, email chains, bank transfers, everything needed to prove he orchestrated a massive embezzlement scheme through shell companies across Nigeria, South Africa, and the UK pension funds, retirement accounts, savings people spent decades accumulating. He stole it all and made it look like legitimate investment losses. How much? $43 million. That we could prove. Probably double that if you count what his partners were doing in parallel networks. Jamin absorbed this without visible reaction. And you worked for him. I was an auditor. I was supposed to catch this kind of thing, except I didn't catch it. I was part of the system that let it happen for 2 years before I finally noticed the patterns. The guilt rose up in her throat, familiar and bitter. By the time I figured it out, hundreds of people had already lost everything. And when I tried to report it through proper channels, I learned that proper channels were owned by the same people protecting Damien. So I copied everything I could find, and I ran. To Seoul. To Seoul. She touched her face gingerly where the ice pack had been. Because I thought I could disappear here. Thought I could hide in a city of 10 million people and nobody would find me. Stupid. Not stupid, Jamin said. You lasted 18 months. That's impressive. Not impressive enough. Naomi closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. He found me. Which means whatever I did to cover my tracks wasn't good enough. And now he knows where I live, who I'm with, everything. Then we changed tactics. She opened her eyes. What? If hiding didn't work— Jamin stood up and moved to the window, looking down at the street below. Rain still sheeted the glass, turning Seoul into an impressionist painting. Then we stop hiding. We bring the fight to him instead. With what? I can't go to the police here. I'm a foreign national married to— no offense— a criminal's grandson. The moment I involve Korean authorities, they'll dig into our marriage and figure out it's fake, and then I get deported, and Damien wins anyway. And international law enforcement? Forget it. Damien has lawyers on 3 continents. He'll tie any investigation up in bureaucracy for years. My family has resources. Jamin kept his eyes on the window, voice carefully neutral. Connections. People who specialize in problems that can't be solved through traditional means. You mean your grandmother's criminal empire? I mean people who care more about results than process. He turned to face her, and the man in the cafe was back, calm, dangerous, absolutely certain. If you want Damien Mercer destroyed, Naomi, I can make it happen. But you need to understand what you're asking for. Because once my family gets involved, there's no going back. This stops being your problem and becomes ours. And we solve problems permanently. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Permanently. Not arrested, not prosecuted. Permanently. Naomi thought about the elderly Nigerian woman whose retirement savings had evaporated overnight. The school teacher in Lagos who'd lost everything and killed himself 2 months later. The families Damien had destroyed with a smile and a handshake, collecting fees while their lives collapsed. She thought about the slap in the cafe, the way her vision had whited out, the casual cruelty of a man who viewed other people as obstacles to be removed. She thought about 18 months of looking over her shoulder, checking locks twice, never quite sleeping deeply enough to dream. I don't want him dead, she said carefully. I want him ruined. I want his victims to get their money back. I want him exposed, humiliated, imprisoned. I want the world to know exactly what he is. That's harder than killing him. I know. But I need him to live with it. I need him to wake up every day for the rest of his life knowing he lost. That I beat him, that all his power and money and connections weren't enough. Jamin studied her face for a long moment. and she couldn't read his expression at all. Then finally, he nodded. Okay, then we do this smart, carefully. And we start by calling my grandmother. Tonight? Right now. He picked up his phone from the side table and scrolled through contacts. Because Damien isn't going to wait for a convenient time to come back. He's scared, which makes him unpredictable. And unpredictable people do desperate things. We need to move first. Naomi watched him dial, watched the phone ring once, twice, 3 times before someone picked up. She couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but Jae-min's entire posture changed, straightening, formal, respectful in a way she'd never seen him before. He spoke in rapid Korean, too fast and formal for her limited vocabulary to catch, but she recognized her own name among the flow of syllables, and Damien's name, and something that sounded like an apology. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes. When Jae-min hung up, his expression was unreadable. She's sending a car, he said. We're expected at the estate in an hour. The estate? My family's compound, north of the city. You'll need to pack essentials. We might be staying there a while. How long is a while? Jae-min met her eyes, and for the first time since the café, she saw genuine emotion crack through his careful control. Not fear exactly. Something more like resignation. However long it takes to either win or die trying. My grandmother doesn't do half measures, Naomi. Once we walk through those gates, we're committing, all the way. And if I say no? If I decide to run instead? Then I'll help you run. Give you money, new identity documents, whatever you need to disappear properly this time. I won't force you into my world. His voice softened. But I think you're tired of running. I think you want this over one way or another. Am I wrong? She wasn't wrong. She was desperately, exhaustedly right. Naomi stood up, legs still shaky but functional, and walked to the bedroom to pack. Behind her, she heard Jae-min making another phone call. More Korean, more formality, something about security and surveillance and blocking a specific set of coordinates. The thin bookstore owner had disappeared completely. What remained was someone else entirely. And Naomi was about to meet his family. The car that arrived wasn't what Naomi expected. No sleek black sedan with tinted windows. No armored SUV that screamed organized crime. Instead, a midnight blue Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Expensive but not ostentatious. The kind of vehicle a successful doctor or lawyer might drive. The kind that didn't attract attention. The driver didn't get out. Didn't speak. Just waited with the engine running while rain drummed against the roof in a rhythm that sounded like fingernails on glass. Jae-min opened the rear door and gestured for Naomi to slide in first. She clutched her hastily packed duffel bag. 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, her laptop with its encrypted hard drive, and the cheap burner phone she'd bought 18 months ago and never used, and ducked into the leather-scented interior. Jae-min followed, pulling the door shut with a solid thunk that made the outside world disappear. The driver pulled into traffic without a word. Not even a glance in the rear-view mirror, just smooth, professional silence as Seoul's neon-soaked streets blurred past the windows. Naomi tried to read Jae-min's face in the shifting light. He'd changed clothes, traded his bookstore casual for dark slacks and a button-down shirt that somehow made him look older, more severe. His wire-rimmed glasses were gone, replaced by contacts she hadn't known he owned. The transformation was subtle but complete. The gentle bookseller had been packed away like a costume he'd worn for a performance that was finally over. "Your grandmother," Naomi said quietly. "What should I expect?" Jae-min didn't take his eyes off the window. Madam Hyejin Kang, 73 years old, runs the family business with the same philosophy she's had since 1982. Be invisible until you can't afford to be, and when you're visible, be terrifying. She built everything from scratch after my grandfather died. Started with 3 brothels in Itaewon and turned it into something that touches real estate, construction, shipping, and financial services across Southeast Asia. Brothels. She closed them in the 90s, said the world was changing, and anyone who couldn't see it coming deserved to die poor. He finally looked at her, and his expression was carefully blank. She's not sentimental. She won't help you because it's right. She'll help because she sees an advantage in it, or because I ask her to, or both. But once she agrees, she's all in, completely. My grandmother doesn't do favors halfway. The Mercedes merged onto a highway heading north, leaving the dense urban center behind. Buildings grew shorter, spread further apart. Seoul's endless sprawl gradually thinned into suburbs, then into something that might have been countryside if you squinted and ignored the light pollution staining the sky orange. "And your father?" Naomi asked. "You said he was her operator." Jae-min's jaw tightened. "We don't speak." "Because you left. Because I told him I'd rather die than become him." The words came out flat, emotionless. He took it personally. The driver took an exit that led to narrower roads winding through hills covered in pine trees. No streetlights here, just darkness punctuated by the occasional gate marking private driveways that disappeared into the trees. Money lived up here. Old money, the kind that didn't advertise itself with ostentatious displays, but instead hid behind walls and security systems, and the kind of privacy that couldn't be bought, only inherited. After 20 minutes of climbing switchback roads, the Mercedes slowed at a gate that looked like it belonged to a traditional Hanok estate. Wooden posts, clay tile roof, understated elegance. Nothing about it suggested criminal empire. Nothing about it suggested anything except wealth and taste. The gate opened without the driver touching anything. Cameras, Naomi realized. Motion sensors, probably facial recognition, security that made itself invisible until it needed to be otherwise. The driveway curved through manicured gardens, carefully pruned pine trees, stone lanterns, a koi pond visible in the Mercedes headlights, before opening onto a courtyard surrounded by traditional Korean buildings that had been updated with modern materials. Glass and steel hiding behind Hanok aesthetics. The architectural equivalent of Jae-min himself, traditional surface concealing something else underneath. The car stopped. The driver finally spoke, just 2 words in Korean that made Jae-min nod and reach for the door handle. "We're expected in the main house," he said. "Leave your bag. Someone will take it to a guest room." Naomi followed him across wet flagstones toward the largest building, its interior lights glowing warm against the rain-soaked darkness. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were shaking again. This was insane. She was walking into a crime family's compound with evidence that could destroy a man who'd already tried to kill her once. Nothing about this was smart or safe or remotely close to a good idea. But Jae-min was right. She was tired of running. The main house's entrance opened before they reached it. A young woman in a charcoal suit stood in the doorway. Late 20s, severe ponytail, the kind of neutral expression that suggested either exceptional training or exceptional medication. "Jae-min Si," she said with a slight bow. "Madam Kang is waiting in the tea room." They followed her through a foyer that managed to be both minimalist and oppressively expensive. Single scroll painting on one wall, probably worth more than Naomi's entire education, and a flower arrangement in an alcove that looked like it had been positioned by someone who understood ikebana at a level most people never achieved. Everything whispered restraint, control, power that didn't need to announce itself. The tea room was exactly what the name suggested. Low table, floor cushions, traditional tea set laid out with geometric precision. And sitting at the head of the table, wearing a simple hanbok in deep charcoal gray, was the most terrifying woman Naomi had ever seen. Madame Heejin Kang didn't look like a crime matriarch. She looked like someone's elegant grandmother, the kind who'd spent her life perfecting flower arrangement and calligraphy. Small-framed silver hair swept into a neat bun, hands folded precisely in her lap. Her face was a map of age lines earned through decades, and her eyes were bottomless, ancient. The kind of eyes that had watched people die and felt nothing except mild interest in the mechanics of it. Jae-min Ah. Her voice was surprisingly soft, almost musical. She spoke in Korean, but Naomi caught the affection in her tone even without understanding the words. Then those ancient eyes shifted to Naomi, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "So this is the woman who brought trouble to my grandson's door." Jae-min responded in Korean, something rapid and defensive. Madame Kang raised one hand, just a slight gesture, barely a movement, and he fell silent immediately. "We'll speak English," she said, switching languages with barely an accent. "I want to understand your wife perfectly when she explains why I should care about her problems." Naomi forced herself to meet those eyes directly. "Because my problems are about to become yours, whether you help me or not." One silver eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. "Explain." Damian Mercer is an international attorney with connections to politicians, judges, and law enforcement across 3 continents. He's already found me once, which means he's probably already investigating Jae-min. And the moment he figures out your grandson is connected to the Kang family, he'll use it. He'll leak it to authorities, use it as leverage, turn it into a scandal that brings scrutiny you don't want. And if I simply kill him? Madame Kang asked the question like she was discussing weather patterns. Bodies disappear. Foreigners die in Seoul every year. Accidents happen. Then his lawyers release everything they have on me to Interpol, the Nigerian Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and probably the FBI. Dead man switch. He's not stupid enough to come after me without insurance, but you have insurance too. Not a question. Statement. This evidence you stole, financial records you said on the phone. Naomi glanced at Jae-min, who nodded slightly. $43 million in documented fraud, email chains, bank transfers, shell company formations. Everything needed to prove Damien orchestrated a massive embezzlement scheme through pension funds and retirement accounts. People lost everything. Families destroyed. Some of his victims killed themselves. Madame Kang's expression didn't change. You worked for him. I was an auditor. I was supposed to catch this kind of thing. And instead you profited from it for 2 years before suddenly developing a conscience. The old woman's voice remained soft, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. What changed, Miss Vale? What made you finally notice the theft you'd been facilitating? The question hit like a physical blow because it was exactly right. Naomi had asked herself the same thing for 18 months. What changed? Why had she finally seen what should have been obvious from the beginning? A woman in Lagos, she said quietly. Elizabeth Okonkwo, 67 years old, worked as a schoolteacher for 43 years. She came into our office asking about her pension account because the monthly payments had stopped. I pulled up her file and saw her entire retirement savings, everything she'd contributed over 4 decades, had been transferred to an investment vehicle that showed 0 returns. When I started tracing the transfers, I found 200 more accounts exactly like hers. All elderly, all pensioners, all cleaned out. And you felt guilty. I felt complicit. Naomi's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against her thighs. I'd signed off on dozens of those accounts. My audit stamps were on the paperwork. I was the person who was supposed to protect people like Elizabeth Okonkwo, and instead I'd made it easier to rob them. Madame Kang studied her in silence for what felt like an hour, but was probably 30 seconds. Then finally, she shifted her attention to Jae-min. You believe her? Yes. Why? Because she's terrified right now and she's still here. If this was a con, she'd have disappeared the moment Damien showed up. Instead, she's sitting in front of you asking for help she knows might cost more than she can pay. That's not a con artist. That's someone who's run out of options. The old woman's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on someone less intimidating. You've gotten soft, grandson. Time was you'd have checked her story 6 ways before bringing her to my door. Time was I'd have killed Damien in the café and dealt with the consequences later. Jaemin's voice remained steady. But you taught me there's usually a smarter way. So I'm asking, is there a smarter way to handle this? Madame Kang poured tea with movements so precise they looked like meditation. Steam rose from 3 cups in perfect synchronization. She pushed one toward Naomi, one toward Jae-min, and kept the third for herself. Your evidence. How many copies? 3 complete sets, Naomi said. Different locations, different security protocols, plus partial backups scattered across cloud storage under dummy accounts. And Damien knows this. He knows I took something. He doesn't know how much or where I've hidden it. But he knows you're here, which means he's already working to flush you out. Lawyers, investigators, probably hired thugs if he's desperate enough. The old woman sipped her tea. He'll come at you from multiple angles simultaneously. Legal pressure through the courts, physical intimidation, character assassination, and he'll target Jae-min specifically because he's your visible weak point. Jae-min set down his untouched tea. Then we hit him first, use the evidence, release it to international authorities before he can bury it. And the moment those files become public, every detail of Naomi's life becomes public with them. Her identity, her location, her connection to my family, the fake marriage that allowed her to stay in Korea. Madame Kang's ancient eyes remained fixed on Naomi. You'll be deported at minimum, possibly arrested as an accomplice to the original fraud. Damien's lawyers will argue, you stole the evidence to cover your own involvement. Can you prove otherwise? Naomi's stomach twisted. I documented everything I found, time-stamped files, my own notes showing when I discovered the scheme. Which proves you knew about it, not that you opposed it, not definitively. The old woman set her tea down with a soft click. And even if you could prove your innocence, the process would destroy you. Years of litigation, public exposure, every mistake you've ever made examined under microscope. Is that what you want? I want him to pay. The words came out harder than Naomi intended. I want the people he robbed to get their money back. I want him in prison. Her voice cracked. I want to stop being afraid. Madam Kang was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at Jae-min. If we do this, if I commit family resources to solving your wife's problem, it will cost us. Money, time, political capital, and it will expose us to scrutiny we've spent 40 years avoiding. So I need to know, grandson. Is she worth it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Naomi watched Jae-min's face, saw something complicated pass through his expression. Guilt? Determination? Maybe something softer he was trying to hide. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but absolutely certain. Yes. Why? Because she's my wife. A wife you married for convenience, a transaction. You said so yourself when you told me about the arrangement. Madam Kang's voice remained soft, probing. What changed? Jae-min didn't answer immediately. He picked up his tea, stared into it like he might find answers in the liquid, then set it down again without drinking. She makes me want to be the person I pretended to be. The bookstore owner. The man who doesn't solve problems with violence. When I'm with her, I almost believe I could be that person permanently. Something that might have been satisfaction flickered through Madam Kang's expression. Good. Then you'll fight to protect her. That's important, because what I'm about to propose will be dangerous for both of you. She clapped her hands twice. The door opened immediately, and a man entered. Early 50s, scarred hands, the kind of face that suggested a life spent doing things people didn't ask about. He carried a tablet, which he handed to Madam Kang before withdrawing silently. This is Damien Mercer's current location. She turned the tablet so they could see. A map showing Central Seoul, a blinking red dot near Gangnam. He's staying at the Park Hyatt, checked in 3 hours ago under his own name. Stupid, arrogant, or bait. Probably bait, Jae-min said. He wants us to come after him, wants evidence of our family's involvement so he can use it. Agreed, which is why we won't touch him directly. Instead, Madam Kang swiped to a different screen showing what looked like a corporate organizational chart. We go after his infrastructure. Damien Mercer doesn't work alone. He has partners, associates, shell companies providing cover. We identify them, expose them, and watch his empire collapse from the inside. Naomi leaned forward, studying the chart. How long will that take? Too long if we do it conventionally, but I know people who specialize in accelerated investigation, financial forensics experts who work outside traditional boundaries, hackers, intelligence brokers, the kind of professionals who can tear apart a man's entire financial life in 72 hours if properly motivated. And the motivation? Jae-min asked. Money. Favors. The usual currencies. Madam Kang's smile was sharp enough to cut. I've been accumulating both for 40 years. Time to spend some. Spend. The next hour dissolved into planning that felt more like military strategy than legal preparation. Madam Kang made phone calls in rapid Korean, her soft voice issuing orders that people on the other end received with what sounded like immediate compliance. The man with scarred hands returned periodically with updates. Surveillance confirmed, contacts established, resources mobilized. Naomi tried to follow the logistics, but the exhaustion finally caught up with her. The adrenaline that had been holding her upright since the café incident was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaky. Her face still throbbed where Damien had hit her. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Jae-min noticed. He always noticed. Grandmother, Naomi needs rest. Madam Kang glanced up from her tablet with something that might have been sympathy in someone less frightening. Of course. Minseo will show you to the guest house. She raised her voice slightly. Minseo, The door opened and a woman stepped in, mid-30s, stylish in that effortless way some people achieve that made everyone else look like they were trying too hard. Sharp blazer, perfect makeup, eyes that assessed Naomi with the kind of analytical precision that suggested she was being cataloged and evaluated in real time. "Cousin," she said to Jae-min with a slight nod, then to Naomi in English. "You must be the auditor. I'm Kang Min-seo. I handle the family's legitimate business interests. Real estate development, mostly. Also damage control when my relatives do something stupid." She shot Jae-min a look that suggested this fell into the stupid category. "Min-seo is my aunt's daughter," Jae-min explained. "Also the smartest person in the family, which is why grandmother keeps her close. Flattery won't help you." But Min-seo's expression softened slightly. "Come on. You both look like hell. The guest house has actual beds, which I'm guessing you need more than strategy sessions right now." Naomi stood, legs protesting. Every muscle in her body had gone tight with stress and exhaustion. She bowed awkwardly to Madame Kang, who acknowledged it with a slight incline of her head, then followed Min-seo out of the tea room with Jae-min close behind. The guest house was across the courtyard, smaller than the main residence but still larger than the apartment above the bookstore. Traditional exterior concealing modern interior. Heated floors. Soft lighting. 2 bedrooms separated by a common area with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over darkness and rain. "Your bags are already here," Min-seo said, gesturing to 2 duffel bags sitting neatly by the door. "Bathrooms through there, kitchens stocked. Don't leave the compound grounds without security, and don't answer the door unless you hear the entry code first. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks." She turned to leave, but Jae-min caught her arm. "Min-seo, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Grandmother's planning something risky. I can tell by the way she's mobilizing resources." Min-seo's expression was serious now, all trace of casual sophistication stripped away. "And when she takes risks, people get hurt. Make sure it's not you two." Then she was gone, leaving them alone in the guest house with nothing but the sound of rain and their own ragged breathing. Naomi sank onto the nearest couch and put her head in her hands. The tears came unexpectedly. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet leaking that she couldn't stop or control. All the fear and stress and exhaustion of the last 18 months pouring out in a release she hadn't known she needed. Jae-min sat beside her, not touching, just present. After a moment he said, "You can still leave. I'll get you new papers, money, a ticket to anywhere. My grandmother will understand." "Will you?" Naomi asked without looking up. Silence. Then quietly, "No, but I'll help you anyway." She finally raised her head and looked at him, really looked, past the careful control to the exhaustion underneath. He was as terrified as she was. He'd just had decades more practice hiding it. "Why? Why commit your family's resources to this? Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" "Because you asked me to. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't care about anything except books and coffee. Because..." He stopped, jaw working like he was physically forcing words out. "Because for 18 months you've been the only person in my life who saw me as normal. Not a Kang, not my grandmother's grandson, not someone who used to hurt people professionally, just a guy who sells books. And I liked being that person, even if it was a lie." "It wasn't a lie, it's just not complete." Naomi wiped her face roughly. "Any more than I'm just an English teacher. We're both running from things, Jae-min. The only difference is your past can help us survive mine." He smiled slightly. "That's one way to look at it." They sat in silence for a while, listening to rain hammer the roof and watching darkness press against the windows. Eventually Jae-min stood and headed to one of the bedrooms, pausing in the doorway. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early and grandmother will expect us functional." "Jae-min?" Naomi called after him. He turned. "In the café when you whispered to Damien, what exactly did you tell him?" His expression went carefully blank. "I told him who my grandmother is. And I told him that if he touched you again, I'd personally ensure his death took 3 days. Could you do that?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt, just flat certainty. "I'm very good at making people suffer, Naomi. It's the one skill I brought with me from my old life. I just choose not to use it anymore." He disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Naomi alone with that statement hanging in the air like smoke. She should have been horrified, should have been terrified, should have seriously reconsidered the wisdom of allying herself with people who discuss torture with the same casual tone most people used for grocery lists. Instead, she felt safer than she had in 18 months, which probably said something terrible about who she was becoming. Eat. Morning arrived gray and cold. Naomi woke to unfamiliar ceiling and the disorienting sensation of not immediately knowing where she was. Memory returned in pieces. The café, Damien's hand cracking across her face, the Mercedes ride through darkness, Madame Kang's ancient eyes assessing her worth like she was livestock at market. Her phone said 6:47 a.m. Too early. Too late. Time felt meaningless. She found Jae-min already awake in the common area, staring at his laptop with the kind of intensity that suggested whatever he was reading wasn't good. He'd showered and changed into fresh clothes, but looked no less exhausted than last night. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight with stress. "What is it?" Naomi asked. He turned the laptop so she could see. News article, English language. International attorney found dead in Seoul hotel room. Naomi's blood went cold. No, we didn't. Your grandmother said, "It's not Damien." Jamin's voice was flat. "Keep reading." She scanned the article. South African attorney. Discovered by housekeeping at the Park Hyatt. Apparent suicide. Name: Richard van der Merwe. Age 56. Known for representing international corporate clients in complex financial disputes. I don't understand. Who is Richard van der Merwe? One of Damien's partners. A lawyer who helped structure the shell companies used in the embezzlement scheme. His signature is on about 40% of the documents in your evidence file. Naomi felt sick. Damien killed him. Almost certainly. Van der Merwe was a liability. Probably demanded protection or money or threatened to cooperate with authorities. So Damien eliminated the problem. Jamin closed the laptop, which means he's already in full crisis mode. Burning assets, destroying evidence, tying up loose ends. Am I a loose end? You're the loose end. The only person outside his organization who has complete documentation of the fraud. As long as you're alive, he's vulnerable. Jamin stood and walked to the windows, staring out at rain-soaked gardens. He'll come for you hard and fast now. No more public confrontations, no more warnings, just elimination. The door opened without knocking. Minseo, looking immaculate despite the early hour, carrying 2 travel mugs of coffee. Saw your lights on. Figured you'd need these. She handed them each a mug, then pulled out her phone. We have a problem, bigger than the dead lawyer. What kind of problem? Jamin asked. The kind where someone inside the family is feeding information to Damien Mercer. Minseo's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Grandmother authorized surveillance on all primary family members last night. Standard security protocol. And at 3 a.m., my uncle, your father, made a phone call to a number that traces back to one of Damien's shell company offices in Singapore. The color drained from Jamin's face. No, he wouldn't. He hates me, but he wouldn't betray the family. Apparently he hates you more than he values family loyalty. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. We don't have audio, but the timing is suspicious enough that grandmother wants him detained and questioned. Detained? Jamin's voice cracked slightly. You mean imprisoned? In the compound holding cells? I mean kept somewhere he can't leak more information until we figure out what he told Damien and how much damage it caused. Minseo's expression was sympathetic but firm. I'm sorry, cousin. I know this is hard, but if your father compromised operational security, we need to contain it immediately. Naomi watched Jamin struggle with this information, saw him cycling through denial and anger and resignation in the space of seconds. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and definite. Do it. Whatever grandmother thinks is necessary. She's already moving on it. He'll be secured within the hour. Minseo turned to Naomi. Which brings us to you. If Damien knows you're here, and we have to assume he does if he has inside information, then this compound is compromised. We need to move you somewhere else. Where? Naomi asked. Everywhere I've hidden, he's found me. Because you've been hiding in predictable places. Safe houses, cities, locations a frightened person would choose. Minseo pulled up a map on her phone. We put you somewhere unexpected. Somewhere Damien would never think to look because it doesn't fit his profile of where refugees run. Where? Jeju Island, tourist destination. My family owns a resort property there, completely legitimate business, no criminal connections that could draw attention. You'll be registered as a guest under a false name. Just another foreign tourist taking a vacation, and we'll surround you with private security disguised as hotel staff. Jamin was already shaking his head. Splitting us up makes us weaker. If Damien moves against either location, which is why you're not going with her. Minseo cut him off. You're staying here. Visible. Present. You're the bait that keeps Damien focused on the compound while Naomi disappears into plain sight 200 miles away. Absolutely not. It's not your decision. Madame Kang's voice came from the doorway, soft and absolute. None of them had heard her approach. She stood framed in the entrance like a ghost made solid, wearing another traditional hanbok and carrying the weight of authority that made generals defer. Minseo's plan is sound. We separate you, divide Damien's focus, and use the time to complete our investigation of his financial network. And if he comes for me directly, Jamin demanded, then you handle it the way I taught you. The old woman's eyes were cold as winter. You wanted to leave that life behind, grandson. But sometimes the past is the only tool that keeps us alive in the present. If Damien Mercer comes for you, I expect you'll remember how to make him regret it. Naomi felt the room tipping sideways. This is insane. You're using Jamin as bait. He could be killed. He could, Madame Kang agreed calmly, but he won't be. Because despite his protests about wanting a normal life, my grandson is exceptionally difficult to kill. I made sure of that during his training. And because Damien Mercer is a coward who hires other people to do his violence, the moment he realizes Jamin is a genuine threat, he'll retreat and regroup. Or he'll send enough people that training doesn't matter. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. The old woman's voice brooked no argument. This is the strategy. You separate. Jamin stays visible here while you hide on Jeju. We complete our financial investigation and prepare the evidence for international release. In 3 days, maybe 4, we'll have everything we need to destroy Damien Mercer legally and permanently. Until then, you survive. Minseo pulled up flight information on her phone. There's a plane leaving Gimpo for Jeju at noon. I'll have you on it under a Canadian passport. We have several already prepared for emergencies. Your legend is simple. English teacher taking a long weekend. You'll have security, but they'll be invisible unless needed. And Jamin stays here. Goes about normal routine as much as possible. Makes himself available if Damien wants another confrontation. And trusts that grandmother's security can handle anything that comes through those gates. Minseo's expression softened slightly. I know this feels like abandoning him, but separating is the smartest play we have right now. Naomi looked at Jamin, who'd gone very still and quiet. You're okay with this? No. His voice was barely audible. But I understand the logic, and I trust my grandmother's judgment even when I hate it. Then it's decided. Madame Kang clapped her hands once. Minseo, arrange transport to Gimpo. Make sure the passport and documentation are flawless. And double security at the resort. I want 4 teams minimum, rotating shifts, with direct communication to my personal number. She turned those ancient eyes on Naomi. You'll take your laptop with the evidence. Keep it with you at all times. Sleep with it under your pillow if necessary. If anything happens here, and Damien succeeds in taking the compound, that evidence is our only remaining leverage. Protect it with your life. Yes, ma'am. Good. Now both of you eat something and pack. Minseo will brief you on security protocols during transport. And Jamin, the old woman's voice softened fractionally. Don't do anything stupid while she's gone. I didn't train you to survive this long just to watch you throw it away on heroic gestures. She disappeared as silently as she'd arrived, leaving them alone with Minseo and the weight of decisions that felt irreversible. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like staging a covert military operation than planning a vacation. Minseo produced a Canadian passport with Naomi's photo, but a different name. Sarah Chen, born in Vancouver, English teacher currently working in Seoul. The documentation was perfect, right down to where patterns suggesting it had been carried in a purse for years. How do you have this ready so fast? Naomi asked. We don't. We maintain a library of emergency identities at all times. You'd be surprised how often they're needed. Minseo packed the passport into a travel wallet, along with credit cards, Korean won, and a phone number written on a card. Memorize this number. If anything goes wrong, and I mean anything, no matter how small, you call it immediately. Someone will always answer. A different car arrived at 10:30. White sedan, completely ordinary, the kind of vehicle that disappeared into traffic. The driver was a woman this time, late 40s, professional demeanor. She accepted Naomi's single bag without comment and held the rear door open. Jae-min walked Naomi to the car, rain misting around them in the gray morning light. Neither of them spoke until they reached the vehicle. Then he stopped, turned to face her, and for the first time since the café, the careful control cracked. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all of this. For bringing you into my family's world. For being the reason Damien found you. You're not the reason. He would have found me eventually. You're the reason I'm still alive." Naomi surprised herself by meaning it. "Just don't die while I'm gone, okay? I've gotten used to having you around." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "I'll do my best." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a cell phone, old and beat up. "Take this. It's a burner I've had for years. Nobody knows the number except me. If you need to reach me directly, use this. Don't trust any other number." Naomi took the phone, their fingers brushing briefly. 3 days, right? That's what your grandmother said." 3 days, Jae-min agreed. "Long weekend. Then you come back and we finish this." She wanted to say something else, something meaningful about trust or partnership or the weird alliance they'd built from desperation and fake marriages. But the words wouldn't come, stuck somewhere between her brain and throat. Instead, she got in the car. The driver pulled away smoothly, and Naomi watched through the rear window as Jae-min stood in the rain, getting smaller and smaller until the trees swallowed him completely. The drive to Gimpo Airport took 90 minutes through Seoul traffic. Naomi spent it memorizing her cover story and trying not to think about all the ways this plan could collapse. Sarah Chen from Vancouver, English teacher, taking a long weekend in Jeju. Simple, believable. Except she couldn't stop seeing Damien's face in the café, couldn't stop feeling his hand crack across her cheek, couldn't stop hearing the promise in his voice that this wasn't over. The driver dropped her at departures and handed her the ticket without a word. Naomi moved through security with her heart hammering, certain that something would trigger. Fake passport, suspicious documentation, hidden evidence on her laptop. But nothing happened. Security waved her through like she was nobody special. Because that's what she was supposed to be. Nobody. Invisible. Just another foreign teacher taking a vacation. The flight to Jeju took an hour. Naomi sat in a window seat and watched clouds blur past while replaying the last 18 months in her mind. Every decision that had led here. Every choice that had seemed so clear at the time, but now felt murky and complicated. She'd stolen evidence to expose corruption. That was good, right? Heroic even. Except it had gotten people killed. Richard van der Merwe, whatever his crimes, was dead. And how many others had Damien eliminated to protect his secrets? How much blood was on Naomi's hands because she'd chosen to fight instead of disappear? The plane descended through clouds toward an island she'd never visited, carrying evidence that could destroy a man who'd proven he'd kill to protect his empire. 3 days, Min Seo had said. 3 days to hide. 3 days for Madame Kang's people to tear apart Damien's financial network. 3 days for Jae-min to stand alone as bait while she ran again. 3 days for everything to go catastrophically wrong. The resort Min Seo had booked was exactly what the website promised. Modern luxury disguised as traditional Korean aesthetics. Ocean views, heated pools, restaurants serving fusion cuisine that cost more per plate than Naomi used to make in a week. She checked in as Sarah Chen, smiled at the desk clerk, and accepted the key card to a room on the 7th floor with views of volcanic rocks and endless water. Inside the room, Naomi locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, wedged a chair under the handle, and then sat on the bed with her laptop clutched against her chest. $43 million, hundreds of victims, evidence that could topple an empire or get her killed trying. Her phone buzzed. The burner Jae-min had given her. Single text message, no signature needed. "You there?" Naomi typed back with shaking fingers. "Yeah, safe. You?" 3 dots indicating typing. Then, "For now, sleep if you can. Tomorrow we fight." She wanted to ask what that meant. Wanted to demand details, timelines, assurances that Madame Kang's plan would actually work. Instead, she sent back, "Don't do anything stupid. Too late for that. I married you, despite everything. The fear, exhaustion, the crushing weight of knowing people were dying because of decisions she'd made." Naomi smiled. Then the power went out. Complete darkness. Not just the lights, but everything. Climate control, the digital clock, even the red standby LEDs on the television. The kind of darkness that suggested the entire building had lost power, not just her room. Naomi was off the bed instantly, laptop tucked under one arm, moving toward the door by memory, and the faint moonlight filtering through windows. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was wrong. Resorts didn't lose power. Not completely. Not like this. She was 3 feet from the door when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Multiple people, moving quickly. Purpose in their rhythm. The door handle turned slowly from outside. Testing. Finding it locked. Then someone knocked. 3 times. Pause. Waiting for the second half of the security code. Naomi's mouth had gone completely dry. This was Minseo's security team. Had to be. They were checking on her because of the power outage. Standard protocol. Except the power outage wasn't standard, and she'd been in hiding long enough to know that coincidences were usually attacks disguised as accidents. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, not breathing, laptop clutched against her chest like a shield. The knocking came again. 3 times. Pause. Patient. Waiting. Never completing the code. Because they didn't know the code. Because they weren't Minseo's people. Naomi backed away from the door slowly, mind racing through options. Window? 7 stories up over volcanic rocks. Phone? Already in her hand, pulling up the emergency number Minseo had given her. The door exploded inward before she could dial. Not picked, not forced carefully. Blown open with enough violence to tear the lock assembly from the frame completely. 2 men came through the opening, fast and professional. Dark clothes, faces covered, moving like people trained in tactical entry. Naomi ran for the bathroom. Stupid. Trapped herself. But instinct overrode logic, and her legs were already moving before her brain caught up. She slammed the bathroom door, locked it, and immediately realized how useless that was. If they'd blown through a hotel door, they could handle a bathroom lock. The window, small, high, probably didn't open far enough, but it was the only option she had. She was climbing onto the toilet, reaching for the latch, when the bathroom door came down just like the first one had, not gently, just immediate overwhelming force. Strong hands grabbed her from behind. The laptop clattered to tile. Someone's arm wrapped around her throat, not tight enough to choke, but firm enough to immobilize. Professional hold, practiced. A voice in her ear. American accent. Stop fighting. We're not here to hurt you. Then what are you here for? Naomi gasped. To bring you to someone who wants to talk. They hauled her toward the shattered doorway and the dark hallway beyond, and Naomi understood with perfect clarity that 3 days had been optimistic. Damien had found her in less than 12 hours, and this time there was no bookstore owner coming to save her. They dragged Naomi through darkness that smelled like smoke and burnt electronics. Emergency lighting flickered in the hallway, weak battery backups casting everything in sickly yellow that made shadows jump and twist. Her feet barely touched carpet as the 2 men hauled her between them, professional and efficient, like moving furniture they'd been paid to relocate. Her laptop was gone. Dropped somewhere in the bathroom chaos. $43 million in evidence just abandoned on tile while these bastards pulled her toward whatever Damien had planned. She tried to twist free, but the grip on her arms was iron, fingers digging into muscle hard enough to leave bruises that would last days. If she lived days. The stairwell door hung open, emergency exit signs glowing red in the darkness. They shoved her through and down concrete stairs that echoed with their footsteps, harsh, rhythmic, the sound of inevitability. Naomi's mind raced through options and came up empty. Scream? In a blacked-out resort full of panicked tourists who'd notice one more voice. Fight? Against 2 men twice her size who moved like military contractors? Run? Where? They were between her and any exit that mattered. Ground floor. Service corridor. The kind of utilitarian space hotels kept hidden from guests. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, industrial lighting that wasn't working because nothing was working. One of the men produced a flashlight that cut through darkness in a tight beam, leading them deeper into the building's guts. They stopped at a door marked Maintenance Authorized Personnel Only. The second man pulled it open to reveal a storage room converted into something else. Folding table, Two chairs, a battery-powered lantern casting harsh white light that made everything look like an interrogation already in progress. Because that's what this was. Damian Mercer sat in one of the chairs, looking significantly less composed than he had in the Seoul café. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His salt and pepper hair had lost its careful styling. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept since their last meeting, but his smile, that practiced venomous thing, was exactly the same. Naomi. He gestured to the empty chair across from him like they were meeting for coffee. Please, sit. The men shoved her into the chair hard enough to knock breath from her lungs. One of them zip-tied her wrists to the metal armrests while the other positioned himself by the door. Professional, practiced. The kind of people Damian could afford to hire when lawyers weren't enough. Where's my laptop? Naomi's voice came out steadier than she felt. Being examined by someone considerably more technical than me. Encrypted, I assume. Damian leaned back, trying to project relaxed confidence, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Doesn't matter, we'll crack it eventually. Or you'll give me the password, one way or another. You killed Richard van der Merwe. Richard killed himself. Very tragic. Left a note about guilt and shame and all the usual cliches people write when they can't handle the pressure. Damian's smile never wavered. Of course he didn't actually write it, but the handwriting analysis will take weeks, and by then nobody will care, because bigger scandals always replace smaller ones. That's how the world works, Naomi. You should have learned that by now. The zip ties cut into her wrists. Naomi forced herself to breathe slowly, to not give him the satisfaction of seeing her panic. The Kong family knows I'm here. They'll come for me. Will they? Damian pulled out his phone, somehow still working when everything else had died, and tapped the screen. Let me show you something interesting. About an hour ago, Madam Hyejin Kang received a phone call from Korean National Police. Anonymous tip about illegal firearms being stored at her compound north of Seoul. Very specific information about locations, quantities, serial numbers. The kind of detail that could only come from someone with intimate knowledge of the property. Naomi's stomach dropped. You had someone inside. Had. Past tense. He's currently in police custody, being very cooperative about everything he knows regarding the Kang family's criminal activities. Fascinating man, actually. Deeply bitter about his son abandoning the family business to sell books and play house with foreign women. Very motivated to see that son suffer consequences. Jaemin's father. The phone call Min Seo had mentioned. It hadn't just been information about Naomi's location. It had been complete betrayal, burning the entire family to hurt his son. They'll figure out it was him, Naomi said. They'll know he fed you that information. Of course they will. But by the time they sort through the legal chaos, identify the mole, and decide how to handle it, you'll be long gone. Disappeared. Another foreign teacher who overstayed her visa and fled back home. Except you won't make it home, will you? You'll vanish somewhere between here and there, and the evidence you stole will vanish with you. He leaned forward, smile finally dropping to reveal something colder underneath. Here's what happens now. You give me access to all your backup files, every location, every encryption key, every copy you've hidden. Then you sign a document I've prepared admitting you fabricated the evidence as revenge after I fired you for incompetence. And then, if you're very cooperative and very lucky, I let you disappear somewhere remote where you can't cause me further problems. And if I refuse, then my associates here demonstrate why that's a poor decision. Damian nodded toward the men flanking the door. They're professionals. They know how to hurt people without killing them quickly, how to make hours feel like days. And I've got all night, Naomi. All week if necessary. Eventually everyone breaks. It's just a question of how much damage you sustain first. The lantern light made shadows dance across Damian's face, turning him into something from nightmares. Naomi's hands were shaking against the armrests, but she forced her voice steady. You think torture will work? You think I'll just give you everything because you threaten pain? I think you're an auditor, not a soldier. I think you've spent 18 months running because you're terrified of confrontation. I think when actual violence starts, you'll fold faster than cheap furniture. He checked his phone again. We have maybe 30 minutes before hotel security figures out the power outage wasn't an accident and starts investigating. So let's be efficient about this. Password for the laptop. Now. Go to hell. Damian sighed like she'd disappointed him. I was afraid you'd be difficult about this. He nodded to one of the men. Start with something small. Fingers are good. Lots of nerves, easy to damage, very motivating. The man moved toward her, and Naomi's entire body locked up with fear so intense it felt like drowning. This was happening. This was actually happening. She'd thought she understood danger when she stole the evidence, thought she knew what risk meant, but that had been abstract, theoretical. This was concrete and immediate, and she could see the knife appearing in the man's hand, see him reaching for her zip-tied wrist, see the lantern light reflecting off the blade. The door exploded inward, not opened, not kicked, blown completely off its hinges by someone moving so fast Naomi's brain couldn't process it as human movement. Just sudden violence erupting into the room like a grenade detonation. Jae-min hit the first man with enough force to send both of them crashing into the concrete wall. The sound of impact was sickening. Bone on stone, air expelled from lungs, the wet crunch of something breaking. The knife clattered away across floor. The second man was already moving, hand diving inside his jacket for what was probably a gun. He got it halfway out before Jae-min was there. Impossibly fast, impossibly precise, hand wrapping around the man's wrist and twisting with a motion that ended in another sharp crack and a scream that echoed off concrete walls. 5 seconds. Maybe less. Two professional contractors disabled and bleeding while Jae-min stood over them breathing hard, wire-rimmed glasses somehow still in place, button-down shirt torn at the shoulder revealing the edge of what looked like a scar from old violence. He looked at Naomi. Are you hurt? She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Just shook her head mutely while her brain tried to reconcile the quiet bookstore owner with the predator that had just dismantled two armed men faster than she could blink. Damien was already on his feet, backing toward the far corner, phone in hand. I've got security coming. Police. You're on camera, you stupid. Jae-min crossed the distance in 2 steps and hit Damien with an open palm to the solar plexus that folded him in half. The phone skittered away. Damien wheezed, gasping for air that wouldn't come, and Jae-min caught him by the throat before he could collapse completely. Where's her laptop? Damien couldn't answer, could barely breathe, just made strangled sounds while his face went purple. Jae-min's other hand appeared with a knife, not taken from the contractor's, his own, carried for exactly moments like this, and pressed the flat of the blade against Damien's cheek. I'm going to ask one more time. Then I start removing things you need to look presentable in court. Where is the laptop? Office, Damien gasped. Manager's office. 2nd floor. Don't please. Jae-min released him and Damien collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, wheezing and coughing on the concrete floor. Then Jae-min was beside Naomi, producing a second knife, how many did he carry, and slicing through the zip ties with quick, precise cuts. Can you run? I don't know, I think so. Then we run. Now. He pulled her to her feet and grabbed Damien's dropped phone in one smooth motion. They'll have backup coming, multiple teams. We have maybe 2 minutes to get clear. The laptop is less important than keeping you alive. Move. They ran. Back through the service corridor, upstairs 2 at a time, Jae-min moving like he'd memorized the building layout before arriving. Emergency lighting still flickered, casting everything in nightmare yellow. Somewhere in the distance, voices shouted, security, probably, finally responding to the power outage and the chaos in the maintenance room, 2nd floor. Manager's office exactly where Damien said. The door was locked, but Jae-min kicked it once, hard, and the frame splintered. Inside, Naomi's laptop sat on a desk next to some kind of technical equipment, hardware designed for cracking encryption, probably. Completely useless without days or weeks to work. She grabbed the laptop and they were moving again down a different corridor toward what Jae-min apparently knew was an emergency exit. Behind them, the voices got louder, closer. Multiple people converging on their position. The exit door dumped them into rain and darkness and volcanic rock beaches stretching toward black ocean. Naomi's lungs burned, her legs were shaking, but Jae-min had her hand and he was pulling her forward, away from the resort lights, toward the kind of darkness that either meant safety or dying alone in the wilderness. They made it maybe 200 yards before headlights appeared ahead, vehicle approaching fast on the beach access road, engine roaring, definitely not friendly. Jae-min changed direction instantly, pulling Naomi toward a cluster of rocks that probably had some tourist-friendly name, but right now just meant cover. They pressed themselves into shadow between volcanic formations while the vehicle, some kind of SUV, screeched to a halt and men poured out. 4 of them. Armed, professional, sweeping the area with flashlights and what looked like rifles. "How many people did he bring?" Naomi whispered. "Enough." Jae-min's voice was barely audible. He was never planning to negotiate. This was always an extraction. Grab you, get the evidence, eliminate the problem permanently. Your grandmother, the police raid, was supposed to keep her occupied while Damien moved on you here. Smart. Divide our forces, attack when we're weakest. He pulled out Damien's phone and scrolled quickly. He's been coordinating with someone. Multiple text chains, but the numbers are all burner phones. No names. One of the men with flashlights was getting closer, maybe 30 feet away, sweeping his light in arcs that were going to reach their hiding spot in seconds. Jae-min pressed the phone into Naomi's hands. "When I move, you run, south along the beach. Half-mile that direction, there's a fishing village. Find someone with a boat. Use Damien's phone to call Minseo. Her number's in my contacts under bookstore supplier. Tell her everything." "What are you going to do?" "Buy you time." He was already moving before she could argue, slipping out from behind the rocks with that unnatural speed, heading not away from the men but toward them. Naomi watched in horror as Jae-min deliberately kicked a loose stone that clattered across volcanic rock. The sound echoed like a gunshot. All 4 flashlights swung toward him immediately. "There, by the rocks!" Jae-min ran, drew them away from Naomi's position, away from her hiding spot, leading them in the wrong direction with his own body as bait. Exactly like his grandmother had planned. Use himself as the target, make the predators chase him while the real objective escaped. Naomi ran the other direction. Her feet slipped on wet rock. Her lungs screamed. The laptop bag banged against her hip with every stride, and she clutched it like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to sanity. Behind her, shouts, and then something that might have been gunfire. Short burst, then silence, then more shouting. She didn't look back. Couldn't afford to. Just ran through rain and darkness while her mind spun through the impossible math of survival. Jae-min against 4 armed men. Madame Kang's compound under police siege. The Kang family's resources tied up in legal chaos while Damien's people hunted her across Jeju Island. They were losing, not slowly, catastrophically. Every advantage they thought they had was either compromised or gone. The safe location wasn't safe. The family protection wasn't available. The careful planning had collapsed under the weight of betrayal from inside the organization. She was alone with evidence that men would kill to possess and no clear path to safety that didn't end in a morgue or the ocean. The fishing village appeared through rain like a mirage. Maybe 20 small buildings clustered around a harbor where boats bobbed in choppy water. Lights in some windows. Life continuing normally because the people here had no idea that someone was being hunted 50 yards from their doorsteps. Naomi stumbled between buildings, soaking wet, gasping for air, trying to figure out which boats looked operational and which looked abandoned. Her fingers were numb with cold and fear as she pulled out Damien's phone and scrolled through Jae-min's contacts. Bookstore supplier. Had to be code. She tapped it, and the phone rang once, twice, 3 times before Minseo's voice answered in Korean, then switched immediately to English. "Who is this?" "It's Naomi. I have Damien's phone. Everything's gone to hell." Silence for 2 seconds. Then Minseo's voice came back harder, sharper. "Where's Jae-min?" He was fighting 4 men to give me time to run. I don't know if..." Naomi's voice cracked. "The resort was compromised. Damien was waiting. He knew exactly where I was, had a whole team ready. And he said something about your grandmother, about police raiding the compound 12 hours ago. We're still dealing with it. Half the family's in custody for questioning, the other half is scrambling to contain legal damage." Minseo's professional calm was fracturing. "Where are you now?" "Fishing village, south end of the island, I think. I don't know what I need. Extraction? Help?" Jae-min said find a boat, but I don't even know where I'd go. "Listen to me very carefully." Minseo's voice dropped to intense focus. Damien didn't just get lucky. Someone fed him detailed information about our entire operation, timing, locations, security protocols. Someone high enough to know things we keep compartmentalized. Your uncle, Jaemin's father. You said he made that phone call, was in custody before you even left for Jeju, couldn't have coordinated this attack from a holding cell. Minseo paused. Which means we have another leak. Someone still operational. Someone close enough to know where we moved you and when. The implications hit Naomi like physical force. You think someone in your family is actively working with Damien. I think we can't trust anyone right now, which makes extraction nearly impossible because I don't know who to send that won't lead Damien straight to you. Naomi pressed herself against a building wall, rain streaming down her face, laptop clutched against her chest. So what do I do? Survive until dawn. Find somewhere to hide. Don't trust anyone offering help. And whatever you do, protect that laptop. If Damien gets those files, every person he's destroyed will never see justice. Minseo's voice softened fractionally. I'll work something out. Get you legitimate law enforcement protection, maybe, or international contacts Damien can't touch. But I need time. Can you give me that? How much time? 6 hours, maybe 8. Stay alive until daylight and I'll have options. The line went dead before Naomi could respond. 6 hours. Stay alive for 6 hours while Damien's people combed the island and she had nowhere to run except into the ocean. She was scanning the boats, trying to identify which ones might have keys left in the ignition like she'd seen in movies when headlights appeared at the village entrance. 2 vehicles. Multiple men climbing out, flashlights sweeping between buildings. They'd tracked her here. Of course they had. Professional hunters with resources and experience tracking one exhausted woman who had no idea what she was doing. The math was inevitable. Naomi ran toward the nearest boat, small fishing vessel, looked operational, and was reaching for the mooring rope when a voice behind her said in English, I wouldn't do that if I were you. She spun. A man stood 10 feet away, blocking her path back toward the village. Not one of Damien's obvious contractors. Older, maybe 60, wearing waterproof jacket and the kind of boots fishermen used. Local, someone who belonged here. Please, Naomi said. I need help. There are men hunting me. I know. His English carried a thick Korean accent, but was perfectly comprehensible. Mr. Mercer told me about you. Said you're a thief who stole from him. Said you're dangerous. Naomi's stomach turned to ice. He's lying. Maybe. Maybe not. The man stepped closer. But he's paying very well for information about foreign women hiding in this village. And I know hard times when I see them. My boats aren't making money. My wife needs medicine I can't afford. So when a rich foreign man offers cash for simple information, I'll pay you more. Whatever he's offering, I'll double it. With what money? You look like you've got nothing except that computer bag. He shook his head, almost sympathetic. I'm sorry, but business is business, and Mr. Mercer's people are waiting at the village entrance. He raised his hand, signaled to the men with flashlights. Naomi did the only thing she could think of. She jumped in the boat, grabbed the mooring rope and yanked it free in one motion, pushed off from the dock with her foot, stumbled backward over equipment as the boat drifted into dark water. The man shouted something in Korean. Flashlights swung toward her position. Someone fired a gun, warning shot probably, or terrible aim, and the bullet pinged off something metal behind her. The boat had a small outboard motor. Naomi fumbled with controls she didn't understand, praying it was simple enough that desperation could replace knowledge. Choke? Throttle? Something that looked like an ignition. The engine coughed, died, coughed again. Men were running toward the dock now, 3 of them. One definitely had his gun out and aimed. The engine caught. Naomi twisted the throttle and the boat lurched forward, nearly throwing her overboard before she caught her balance. Dark water opened around her as she steered away from shore, away from the flashlights and gunfire, toward the kind of open ocean that either meant escape or drowning alone in the dark. Behind her, the men reached the dock. More gunfire. Serious this time, aimed to kill or disable the engine. Bullets zipped through air and splashed into water close enough that Naomi could feel the spray. She pushed the throttle harder, coaxing more speed from an engine that sounded like it might die any second. The boat bounced across choppy water, rain stinging her face, volcanic coastline receding into darkness behind her. She'd escaped immediate capture. Stolen a boat she had no idea how to operate. And now she was heading into open ocean at night, with no destination, no supplies, and enemies on shore who definitely had faster boats and better knowledge of local waters. Her phone, Damien's phone, buzzed in her pocket. Text message. Unknown number. You can't run forever. Naomi looked at the laptop bag clutched in her other hand. $43 million in evidence. Hundreds of victims who deserved justice. And one exhausted auditor who just gambled everything on the insane hope that stealing a fishing boat in a storm might somehow lead to survival. The engine sputtered. The fuel gauge? Did small boats have fuel gauges? Looked wrong. Too low. This vessel probably had enough fuel for day trips, not midnight escapes into open ocean. She was going to die out here. That reality crystallized with perfect clarity as the coastline disappeared completely, and she was alone in darkness with nothing but rain and waves and the knowledge that she'd failed everyone who'd trusted her. The engine died. Complete silence except for rain hammering the boat and waves slapping against the hull. Naomi sat in the darkness, soaking wet, shivering with cold and shock, laptop still clutched against her chest like it mattered. Then lights appeared in the distance, back toward shore. Multiple boats launching, coming after her with the kind of organized efficiency that suggested they'd done this before. She was trapped, out of fuel, out of options, sitting in darkness waiting for Damien's people to close the distance and finish what they'd started in the resort maintenance room. Naomi pulled out the phone and tried Minseo's number again. It rang, and went to voicemail. She tried again, same result. The pursuing boats were getting closer. Maybe 10 minutes out, maybe less. This was how it ended. Not in dramatic confrontation, but quiet surrender in the dark, while rain washed away any evidence that she'd tried to fight back. Naomi opened her laptop with numb fingers. The screen glowed in the darkness, somehow still charged, somehow still functioning despite everything else falling apart. She pulled up the evidence files. $43 million in documented theft. Names, dates, bank transfers, email chains proving conspiracy across 3 continents. She pulled up her email, typed quickly, frantically, attaching every file she could before the pursuing boats arrived. Recipients: Nigerian Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, UK Serious Fraud Office, FBI Financial Crimes Unit, Interpol Headquarters. Every legitimate law enforcement agency she could think of that might actually investigate instead of being compromised by Damien's connections. Subject line: Evidence of International Embezzlement by Damien Mercer. Time-stamped proof. Body: My name is Naomi Vale. I worked as an auditor for Damien Mercer's financial consulting firm in Lagos. Attached is complete documentation proving systemic fraud targeting pension funds and retirement accounts across Nigeria, South Africa, and the UK. I am currently being hunted by Mercer's associates. If you're reading this, I am likely dead. Please ensure the victims receive justice. NV. Her finger hovered over send. This was it, the nuclear option. Releasing everything meant burning every bridge, destroying any chance of controlled disclosure, putting her face and name permanently attached to evidence that would make her a target forever. But forever was probably going to be very short anyway. The pursuing boats were close enough now that she could see individual flashlights. Close enough to hear engines. Naomi hit send. The progress bar crept across the screen, 66%, 78%, 91%. One of the pursuing boats was maybe 2 minutes away. She could hear voices calling to each other across the water. 99%. Sent. Naomi closed the laptop and wrapped it in her jacket, then tied the bundle as tightly as she could with the jacket sleeves. She kissed it once. Stupid, sentimental gesture that meant nothing, and dropped it over the side of the boat. The laptop sank into black water and disappeared. Evidence delivered, mission technically accomplished, and Naomi Vale was now sitting in a stolen fishing boat with nothing left to bargain with except her own life, which Damien Mercer had already demonstrated he valued at exactly nothing. The first pursuit boat pulled alongside. Powerful spotlight hit her face, blinding. Someone shouted orders in English. Hands grabbed her arms and hauled her across to the larger vessel. Zip ties again, professional restraint. They were taking no chances this time. They didn't speak to her during the ride back to shore. Didn't need to. The situation explained itself. Naomi sat on the deck, hands bound, shivering with cold, and watched Jeju's coastline approach while her mind replayed every decision that had led here. She thought she could fight corruption with evidence, thought truth mattered more than power, thought hiding with criminals could protect her from worse criminals. She'd been wrong about everything. The boat docked at a private marina, not the fishing village. More men waiting, a vehicle with tinted windows. They loaded her inside without ceremony and drove north through rain-soaked darkness toward a destination she could only imagine and desperately hope wasn't her last. The vehicle stopped at what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Generic concrete building in an industrial area where nobody would notice or care about screaming. They hauled Naomi inside and she saw the setup immediately. Tarp on the floor, plastic sheeting on walls, tools arranged on a table. The kind of preparation that suggested this wasn't interrogation anymore. This was disposal. Damien emerged from the shadows, looking significantly more composed than the maintenance room. Someone had given him dry clothes and fixed his hair. The venomous smile was back in place. You've been quite difficult, Naomi. More trouble than you're worth, honestly. But I appreciate the challenge. It's been educational. I sent everything. Her voice came out hoarse, damaged. Every file, every piece of evidence. It's already at Interpol, the FBI, financial crimes divisions across 3 continents. You've lost, Damien. Even if you kill me, you've lost. His smile never wavered. Have I? He pulled out a tablet and turned it to face her. Email screen. Her email screen. The message she'd sent. Status? Failed to send. Network error. Boat was too far offshore, Damien explained pleasantly. Island cell towers don't reach that far. And by the time you got close enough to shore, my people had already jammed the local signals. So your dramatic final gesture? Never actually transmitted. The files are still sitting in your outbox, unsent. And the laptop you threw overboard? He nodded to one of his men who stepped forward holding a soggy bundle. Waterproof cases are wonderful things. Thank you for marking the drop location so clearly. Naomi felt something break inside her chest. Not her body. Something deeper. The last fragile hope that maybe, possibly, she could win this fight through determination and moral righteousness. She couldn't. Evil won sometimes. Power triumphed. People like Damian Mercer destroyed people like her and faced no consequences except the mild annoyance of cleanup. So what happens now? Her voice sounded dead even to her own ears. Now you disappear. Completely. There are places in these waters where bodies sink very deep and don't come back. Damien set the tablet aside. I'd say I'm sorry it came to this, but we both know I'm not. You made your choices. I made mine. Mine just happened to have better backing. One of the men grabbed her arms, started dragging her toward the plastic sheeting. The warehouse door exploded inward with enough force to send shrapnel across concrete. Not opened. Not breached carefully. Completely demolished by what sounded like a vehicle ramming through at full speed. Metal shrieked. Concrete dust filled the air. And through the destruction came something that made every person in the warehouse freeze. Madame Hyejin Kang walked through the shattered entrance like a queen arriving at court. Still wearing her traditional hanbok, still moving with that precise, terrifying grace. Behind her came maybe 20 men, not contractors or hired thugs, but family. Real Kang organization members with the kind of loyalty money couldn't buy. And beside her, bloody and limping but very much alive, came Jae-min. His glasses were gone. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye. His button-down was torn and soaked through. But he was moving under his own power, and the look on his face was absolutely murderous. Madame Kang surveyed the warehouse with ancient eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by preparations for more. Mr. Mercer, I believe you have something that belongs to my family. Damien's professional composure shattered completely. You were supposed to be in custody. Police raid. Your entire compound was raided 12 hours ago, yes. Very inconvenient. The old woman's voice remained soft. But I've been dealing with police raids since before you were born, child. It takes more than anonymous tips and planted evidence to actually contain the Kang family. We simply let them think they'd won while my grandson tracked your people to this location. She stepped closer and Damien actually backed up. Physical retreat from someone a third his size. You made 3 critical mistakes, Mr. Mercer. First, you assumed my family's connections were limited to Korea. They're not. We have friends in very useful places who are currently ensuring your international bank accounts are frozen, and your shell companies are being audited by people considerably less sympathetic than Miss Vale. Second, You assumed hurting my grandson would make him weaker. Instead, it reminded him why I trained him so thoroughly in the first place. And third, most fatal, you touched what belongs to my family. She nodded once. Jae-min moved. He crossed the distance to Damien faster than any of the contractors could react, grabbed him by the throat, and slammed him against the warehouse wall hard enough to crack concrete. No finesse, no precision, just pure, overwhelming violence from someone who'd finally stopped holding back. Every time you hit her, Jae-min said quietly, voice ragged with controlled fury. Every time you threatened her, every moment you made her feel hunted and afraid. I'm going to return that with interest. Your grandmother said, Damien gasped. My grandmother said keep you alive for prosecution. Jae-min's smile was terrible. She didn't say keep you comfortable. He released Damien, who collapsed wheezing. Then Jae-min turned to the men who'd been seconds away from disposing of Naomi's body. Which one of you was holding her? None of them answered. 3 of them bolted for the shattered doorway. Madame Kang's men intercepted them before they made it 5 feet. Professional, efficient. The kind of takedown that happened so fast the contractors barely had time to understand they were outmatched. Jae-min knelt beside Naomi and cut through the zip ties with the same knife he'd used in the resort. His hands were shaking, not with fear but with barely suppressed rage that made him more frightening than calm. Did they hurt you? I'm okay. She wasn't. Nothing about this was okay, but she was alive and Jae-min was alive, and that seemed like enough for now. Madame Kang produced a phone and made a call, speaking rapid Korean. Then she addressed Damien in English, clear enough for Naomi to hear. You have 2 choices, Mr. Mercer. Choice 1. You cooperate fully with international authorities. You plead guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. You provide testimony against your remaining partners. And in exchange, I ensure you serve your sentence in a facility where you won't be mysteriously killed in your sleep. Choice 2. You refuse, and I let my grandson handle this his way. Which path appeals more? Damien looked at Jae-min, saw something in those eyes that transcended legal threats into genuine promise of suffering, and made the smart choice. I'll cooperate. Excellent. Madame Kang turned to one of her men. Call our contact at Interpol. Tell them we're delivering Mr. Mercer personally, along with complete financial evidence of his crimes. And mention that Miss Vale's testimony will be provided under witness protection conditions we approve. She looked at Naomi with those ancient, terrible eyes. You wanted justice, child. You wanted the people he robbed to see restitution. You're about to get both. But understand that justice through my methods comes with obligations. You're part of this family now, truly, not fake marriage for visa, real, which means when we need you someday, you come. Understood? Naomi met those eyes and saw exactly what was being offered. Protection, power, belonging. All in exchange for the kind of loyalty that made conventional morality complicated. She thought about Elizabeth Okonkwo and the hundreds like her who'd lost everything. Thought about 18 months of fear and running. Thought about the auditor she'd been versus the person she'd become through desperation and survival. Understood, she said, and meant it completely. The Interpol handoff should have been simple. Clean transfer of custody in neutral territory with international witnesses and legal documentation that made everything official and irreversible. Damien Mercer in chains, evidence cataloged and secured, justice finally moving forward through proper channels after 18 months of chaos. Should have been. The location was Incheon Port, massive shipping facility where cargo moved between countries and bureaucratic oversight created natural cover for sensitive operations. Madame Kang had arranged the meeting through contacts that existed in the gray space between law enforcement and organized crime. The kind of relationships built over decades of mutually beneficial arrangements that nobody discussed in official reports. They arrived in 3 vehicles just before dawn. Naomi rode with Jae-min and Madame Kang in the lead car, laptop bag clutched against her chest like a talisman that had lost its protective power but still demanded respect. Behind them came 2 more vehicles full of Kang family security, 8 men total, all carrying weapons they technically weren't supposed to have, but everyone pretended not to notice because pretending kept things civil. Damien rode in the second vehicle, zip-tied and silent, staring out the window with the hollow expression of someone who'd finally realized that money and connections only protected you until they didn't. The port at dawn was the landscape from industrial nightmares. Shipping containers stacked like building blocks, massive cranes looming against gray sky, the smell of salt water and diesel fuel thick enough to taste. Their vehicles stopped at a designated meeting point near Container Block 7, where an unmarked van waited with 3 people standing beside it. 2 men in suits that screamed federal agent, American, probably FBI Financial Crimes Division based on their haircuts and the way they stood with that particular brand of righteous authority. And 1 woman, late 50s, severe expression, carrying herself like someone who'd spent a career making criminals regret their life choices. Madame Kang exited first, moving with that precise grace that made everyone around her look clumsy by comparison. Jae-min followed, then offered his hand to help Naomi out of the vehicle. His grip was steady, but she could feel the tension vibrating through him like a wire pulled too tight. He'd barely spoken since the warehouse, and when he did, his voice carried an edge that suggested the violence he'd unleashed hadn't quite receded back into whatever locked box he usually kept it in. The woman stepped forward, hand extended. "Madam Kang, I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen, Interpol Financial Crimes." We spoke on the phone. "Agent Chen," Madam Kang's handshake was brief, professional. "Thank you for the discretion. This situation required careful handling." Apparently, Chen's eyes swept across the assembled group. Kang's security, bound prisoner, the clear evidence of organized crime infrastructure supporting this transfer. Though I'll note for the record that your methods are irregular at best. And yet effective. Mr. Mercer is here, conscious and ready to provide testimony. That's more than your conventional investigation achieved in 18 months. Chen's expression suggested she wanted to argue that point, but couldn't. Instead, she turned her attention to Naomi. "Miss Vale, we've reviewed the evidence files you attempted to transmit last night. Preliminary analysis suggests they're comprehensive and damning. Are you prepared to provide formal testimony supporting these documents?" Naomi's mouth was dry. This was it. The moment where she either committed completely or found a reason to back out and disappear into permanent hiding. "Yes. That testimony will require you to admit your own involvement in the initial fraud. You signed off on questionable accounts. Your audit stamps appear on documents facilitating the embezzlement. Defense attorneys will argue you were complicit. I know. You could face criminal charges yourself, accessory to fraud, conspiracy. The prosecution will argue for immunity in exchange for your cooperation, but there are no guarantees." "I understand." Naomi's voice steadied. "I want the victims to get their money back. Whatever personal cost that requires, I'll pay it." Something that might have been respect flickered through Chen's expression. "All right, then let's make this official. Bring out the prisoner." 2 of Madame Kang's men hauled Damien from the second vehicle. He looked diminished in the gray dawn light, expensive suit rumpled and stained, carefully maintained facade cracked beyond repair. But when his eyes met Naomi's, she saw the hatred burning there hadn't diminished at all. Just been compressed into something harder and more concentrated. "This isn't over," he said quietly as they walked him past. "You think putting me in prison ends this? I have lawyers who'll tie your testimony in knots for years. I have friends who'll make sure you never feel safe again. I have—" Jae-min moved faster than Naomi's brain could process. One moment he was standing beside her. The next he had Damien slammed against the side of the vehicle, forearm across his throat, face inches away. "You have nothing, no power, no protection, no future, except whatever cell they put you in. So shut your mouth before I shut it permanently." "Jae-min," Madame Kang's voice carried just enough warning. "Let the agents handle this." He released Damien and stepped back. But the predator was fully visible now. No more bookstore owner, no more gentle husband, just the thing the Kang family had trained him to be before he'd tried to walk away from it. Chen and her colleagues took custody of Damien with professional efficiency, transferring him to their vehicle while reading rites that sounded ritualistic and meaningless at this point. Everyone knew what happened next. Formal arrest, international charges, years of legal proceedings, the machinery of justice grinding forward with the speed of glaciers. Naomi should have felt relief, victory, some sense that 18 months of fear had finally produced results. Instead, she felt hollow, numb, like she'd spent so long preparing for this moment that actually reaching it left her with nothing to do except stand in diesel-scented dawn and watch bureaucracy consume the man who'd destroyed her life. "Miss Vale?" Chen approached with a tablet. I need you to review and sign these preliminary statements, just acknowledging that you're providing evidence voluntarily and understand your rights. The full deposition comes later. Naomi took the tablet. Legal language dense enough to require translation. She was scanning the first paragraph when the shooting started. Not warning shots, not controlled fire, just sudden, overwhelming violence erupting from behind a stack of shipping containers 50 yards away. Automatic weapons. Multiple shooters. The sound was deafening, constant rapid cracks that echoed off metal containers and concrete until it felt like the entire port was exploding. Agent Chen went down first, bullet catching her in the shoulder and spinning her around. One of her colleagues returned fire, while the other dragged her toward cover behind their van. Kang's security scattered, professional training overriding shock as they moved to defensive positions and started acquiring targets. Jae-min had Naomi on the ground before she fully processed what was happening, his body covering hers, hand pressing her face against cold concrete while bullets pinged off vehicles and shattered glass rained down around them. "Stay down," he hissed into her ear. "Don't move. Don't look." But she did look, turned her head just enough to see Damien's transport vehicle. The rear door was open. Damien was gone. Someone had used the chaos to extract him. Professional operation, coordinated timing, the kind of rescue that required planning and resources and people willing to start a firefight at a major port facility. "He's escaping." Naomi tried to rise, but Jae-min held her down with enough force to hurt. "I know. Let my grandmother's people handle it." Madame Kang stood behind their vehicle, completely calm despite bullets cracking through the air around her, speaking rapid Korean into her phone, making calls, coordinating response, managing a tactical situation like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Because she probably had. The gunfire intensified. One of the Kang security members went down, clutching his leg and screaming. Another returned fire with a pistol that sounded pathetically inadequate compared to the automatic weapons the attackers were using. This wasn't a random ambush. This was a full tactical assault by people who'd come prepared to fight through serious opposition. Through the chaos, Naomi saw movement near Container Block 8, 3 figures running, 2 supporting a third between them. Even at this distance, she recognized Damien's expensive suit, his stumbling gait as the men hauled him toward what looked like a service vehicle waiting beyond the containers. He was getting away. After everything, the evidence, the confession, the careful legal transfer, he was just going to disappear into whatever network of corruption and money he'd built over decades. "We have to stop him." Naomi was moving before conscious thought caught up, scrambling out from under Jae-min's protective cover, running toward the escaping figures with nothing except desperate momentum and 18 months of accumulated fury. "Naomi, no!" Jae-min's shout behind her was drowned by more gunfire. She made it maybe 20 yards before someone tackled her from the side. Not one of the shooters, Minseo, appearing from behind a container where she'd apparently been providing overwatch, slamming into Naomi and dragging her behind cover as bullets sparked off metal inches from where they'd been standing. "Are you insane?" Minseo's perfectly maintained composure had cracked into genuine terror. "They're trying to kill everyone who can testify. Running toward them is suicide. He's escaping, and chasing him gets you dead." Minseo pulled out her own weapon, compact pistol, the kind executives carried for personal protection. "We fall back, regroup, let law enforcement handle pursuit." But law enforcement was pinned down behind their vehicle, one agent wounded, the others focused on survival rather than pursuit. And Damien was already at the service vehicle, his rescuers loading him into the back. Naomi watched through the gap between containers as the vehicle started moving, not racing away. That would attract attention from port security. Just pulling out smoothly like any other authorized vehicle, disappearing into the maze of containers and loading docks where dozens of similar vehicles moved constantly. Gone. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. The attackers melted away into the container maze, mission accomplished, leaving behind shell casings and blood and the shattered remnants of what was supposed to be a clean legal transfer. Naomi knelt behind the container with Minseo and felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking. Cracking. The fissure between the person she used to be, the auditor who believed in process and procedure, and the person she was becoming. Someone who understood that justice sometimes required burning the rulebook. Jae-min appeared beside them, breathing hard, blood seeping from a cut on his temple where glass had apparently caught him. You okay? He got away. Naomi's voice sounded dead. After everything we did, all the evidence, the confession, he just got away. Not for long. Madame Kang materialized like a ghost, Hanbok somehow still pristine despite the violence around her. I have people tracking that vehicle, multiple teams. He can't hide in Seoul. He's not going to hide in Seoul. Minseo was already pulling up something on her phone. Look, port security cameras. The vehicle that extracted him had diplomatic plates. Russian embassy. He's making a run for asylum. The implications hit like a hammer. If he reaches the embassy, international protection, diplomatic immunity. He files asylum claims based on persecution, says Korean organized crime is trying to kill him, and Russia grants sanctuary because embarrassing South Korea serves their geopolitical interests. Minseo's expression was grim. We have maybe 30 minutes before he's untouchable. Emergency vehicles were converging on the port. Real police, not the carefully managed situation Madame Kang had arranged. Sirens wailing, lights flashing, the kind of official response that made further irregular operations extremely difficult. Agent Chen was being loaded into an ambulance, conscious but clearly in pain. Her colleague approached Madame Kang with an expression that mixed professional obligation with personal fury. I need everyone here to remain for questioning. This is an active crime scene. Federal investigation. You don't leave until we have statements from every witness. Of course. Madame Kang's voice carried absolute sincerity that fooled nobody. We'll cooperate fully with your investigation. The agent knew she was lying. Everyone knew. But what could he do? Arrest the 73-year-old woman in traditional dress? Detain the witnesses who'd just been shot at and could claim trauma? He settled for, "Don't make me regret this," before returning to coordinate with the arriving police. Madame Kang turned to her family. We have a small window, maybe 20 minutes before they lock down the port completely and we lose any chance of pursuit. Minseo, where's the embassy vehicle now? Heading northwest, diplomatic route toward Yongsan. They'll take Gangbyeon Expressway to avoid traffic. Can we intercept? Technically, yes. Practically? Minseo hesitated. Grandmother, attacking a diplomatic vehicle is an international incident. Even for us, I'm not asking permission, child. I'm asking for logistics. Jae-min was already moving toward their vehicles. 3-car pursuit. We box them at the Banpo Bridge junction. Narrow approach, limited exits. Force them off the road before they reach embassy grounds. And the diplomatic immunity? Minseo pressed. Only applies if they reach the embassy. On the road, they're just another vehicle breaking traffic laws. Jae-min's smile was terrible. We make it look like an accident, aggressive driving, unfortunate collision. Nobody can prove intent. Naomi listened to them planning vehicular assault like discussing dinner options and realized this was her last decision point. She could stay here. Give her statement to investigators. Let the system handle Damien through proper channels, even though proper channels had just catastrophically failed. Be the auditor. Follow the rules. Or she could get in the car with criminals and chase down a man who'd proven he'd burn the world before facing consequences. I'm coming with you, she said. No. Jae-min's voice was flat. Absolutely not. This is going to be dangerous and probably illegal, and I don't care. Naomi's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed steady. 18 months he's hunted me. He stole from hundreds of people. He killed Richard van der Merwe. He tried to kill me multiple times, and now he's just going to disappear into a Russian embassy and live comfortably while his victims suffer? No. I'm seeing this through, whatever it takes. Madame Kang studied her with those ancient eyes. Once you cross this line, Miss Vale, there's no going back. You become complicit in assault, possibly kidnapping, definitely multiple international law violations. Your testimony becomes tainted, your credibility destroyed. Are you truly willing to sacrifice your legal position for revenge? This isn't revenge. This is making sure he doesn't escape. Naomi met the old woman's gaze directly. And yes, I'm willing. A small smile curved Madame Kang's lips. Good. Then let's move. They split into 3 vehicles. Naomi with Jae-min in the lead car, Minseo coordinating from the second, Madame Kang with her most experienced security in the third. The remaining Kang members stayed behind to manage the police situation, buying time with cooperation and confusion in equal measure. Jamin drove like someone who'd learned in contexts where traffic laws were suggestions. Fast but controlled, weaving through morning traffic with precision that suggested either extensive practice or complete disregard for personal safety. Probably both. Naomi braced herself against the dashboard as they accelerated onto the expressway, morning Seoul blurring past in streaks of concrete and neon. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists. This was insane. Criminal, everything she'd spent her career avoiding, and she'd never felt more certain of anything. There. Jamin pointed ahead where a black SUV with diplomatic plates moved in the center lane, driving carefully, legally, exactly like a vehicle that knew it was protected by international law. Minseo, confirm identity. The radio crackled. Confirmed. License plate matches embassy vehicle registry. 3 occupants visible. Target is middle rear seat. Copy. Approaching from rear left. Grandmother, can you flank right? Already moving. Madame Kang's voice through the radio was calm, as discussing tea preferences. The tactical ballet began. 3 vehicles converging on one target, closing distance slowly enough to avoid obvious pursuit, but fast enough to catch up before the junction. Professional. Practiced. The kind of maneuver that required experience and communication and absolute certainty that everyone involved knew their role. The diplomatic SUV seemed oblivious. Why wouldn't it be? It was protected. Untouchable. The people inside probably felt invincible as they drove toward sanctuary. They were wrong. Bampo Bridge Junction approached. Massive interchange where 3 expressways merged in concrete spaghetti that required careful navigation even in light traffic. During morning rush hour, it was controlled chaos. Dozens of vehicles jockeying for position, everyone trying to reach their exit, the kind of environment where accidents happened constantly, where one more accident wouldn't seem suspicious. Now, Jamin said into the radio, all 3 Kang vehicles moved simultaneously. Madame Kang's car accelerated hard on the right, cutting into the diplomatic SUV's lane and forcing it left. Minseo's vehicle pressed from behind, eliminating escape backwards. And Jamin brought their car alongside on the left, matching speed, boxing the target completely. The diplomatic SUV's driver finally noticed the problem. Naomi saw his head turn, saw him assess the situation, and realize he was trapped. He accelerated hard, trying to break free of the box. Jamin matched him instantly, staying perfectly parallel. Minseo, tighten up. Don't let them break free. Copy. The junction was seconds away. Concrete barriers on both sides. Limited maneuvering room. Nowhere to go except where the Kang vehicles directed. The diplomatic driver panicked. Swerved right into Madame Kang's vehicle. Metal scraped metal, with a sound like tearing fabric, amplified through nightmare acoustics. Both vehicles bounced apart, but Madame Kang's driver held position, professional and calm. Jamin turned their wheel fractionally left. Their car drifted into the diplomatic SUV's space, not hard enough to cause serious damage, but enough to force it toward the shoulder, toward the concrete barrier, toward the choice between controlled stop or catastrophic crash. The diplomatic driver chose survival. Slammed the brakes. The SUV skidded sideways, tires screaming, bounced off the concrete barrier with enough force to deploy airbags, and came to rest halfway onto the shoulder with smoke rising from the crumpled hood. The Kang vehicles stopped in perfect synchronization. Doors opened. 8 men emerged, moving fast but not running, approaching the damaged SUV with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested this wasn't their first forced stop. Traffic slowed around them, rubberneckers trying to see what happened, exactly the kind of attention they didn't need. But the Kang security formed a perimeter that blocked casual observation while Jamin approached the diplomatic SUV's rear door. He opened it carefully. Found Damian Mercer inside, dazed from the airbag deployment, bleeding from a cut above his eye, staring up with the expression of someone who just realized diplomatic immunity only worked if you reached the embassy. "Hello again," Jamin said quietly. Then he grabbed Damian by the collar and hauled him out of the vehicle onto the concrete shoulder. The 2 Russian embassy staff were shouting in English and Russian, demanding they release the passenger, threatening international consequences. One of them tried to grab Jamin's arm. He shrugged off the contact without even looking at the man, focused entirely on Damian. You can't do this, Damien gasped. Blood ran from his head wound down his face, mixing with tears or sweat. I have asylum, international protection. You're committing an act of... Jae-min hit him. Not a calculated strike like in the warehouse, just a pure expression of accumulated rage that sent Damien sprawling on concrete. You made my wife run for 18 months. You slapped her in a café. You sent people to kill her on Jeju. And now you think hiding behind diplomatic paperwork protects you? He was reaching for Damien again when Naomi's voice cut through. Jae-min, stop. He froze, hand extended, murder clear in his eyes. Naomi, I said stop. She stepped forward, moving past the Kang security to stand over Damien's broken form. He's not worth it. Killing him makes him a victim, a martyr his lawyers can use. We need him alive, broken, humiliated, and alive. Damien looked up at her with something that might have been hope. You're right. Be reasonable. Let me reach the embassy and you'll confess. Naomi pulled out her phone and started recording. Right here, right now, on camera. Full confession to embezzling $43 million. Names of your partners. Details of the shell companies. Everything. You're bleeding on a highway shoulder after fleeing legitimate custody. You just invalidated any asylum claim by running instead of surrendering to proper authorities. The Russians won't protect you now. You're a liability who brought violence to their diplomatic vehicle. Naomi crouched beside him, phone camera steady. So you have two choices. Confess on camera, and I'll make sure Interpol gets you into proper custody with reduced charges for cooperation. Or refuse, and I let Jae-min finish what he started. Your call. Chiki-taki wo tamante. Sirens were approaching, multiple vehicles, real police who'd been notified of the expressway accident and were coming to investigate. Damien looked at the sirens, then at Jae-min's expression, then at Naomi's phone camera. Math happening behind his eyes, calculations about survival and consequence and which path led to less suffering. 43 million, he said quietly. Through 17 shell companies registered in Nigeria, South Africa, and the British Virgin Islands. My partners were Richard van der Merwe, Thomas Chen in Hong Kong, and he kept talking, listing names and details while Naomi's phone recorded every word. By the time police arrived, they found an accident scene with injured parties giving statements. A diplomatic vehicle damaged but occupants unhurt. And one American attorney with minor injuries being very cooperative about international embezzlement charges. Nothing that looked like a coordinated assault or kidnapping attempt. Just an unfortunate traffic incident that resulted in the custody of a wanted criminal. The police separated everyone for statements. Naomi gave hers carefully. She'd been pursuing Damien legally, had witnessed the accident, was present when he chose to confess. All technically true. All carefully phrased to avoid mentioning the coordinated vehicular attack that forced him off the road. Agent Chen arrived by ambulance, shoulder bandaged, expression hovering between fury and grudging respect. That was the sloppiest excuse for an arrest I've ever seen. But effective, Madame Kang observed from where she sat giving her own statement. Effective, illegal, probably going to cause an international incident. Chen grimaced as her shoulder moved wrong. But I have his confession on video and enough corroborating evidence to make prosecution viable, even if defense attorneys scream coercion. So, thank you. I think. Never do anything like this again. Of course not, Madame Kang said with perfect sincerity that fooled nobody. They kept everyone for 3 hours. Statements. Documentation. Medical evaluation for anyone who'd sustained injuries. The bureaucratic machinery of law enforcement grinding through details while Damien sat in a police vehicle, handcuffed and defeated, staring at nothing. Naomi watched him through the window and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief. Just exhaustion so profound it felt like drowning. She'd won. Somehow, impossibly, through violence and criminal conspiracy and burning every bridge with legitimate law enforcement, she'd actually won. And all it had cost was her integrity, her legal standing, and whatever remained of her soul that wasn't already compromised by 18 months of survival. Jae-min found her sitting on a concrete barrier, staring at Seoul stretching endlessly in all directions. He sat beside her without speaking, just present in the way he'd been since that first night in the café when her world exploded. Your grandmother was right, Naomi said quietly. I can't go back. Not to teaching, not to normal life. I'm complicit now. Part of your world. Is that what you want? She thought about that question, really considered it. The auditor she'd been would have said no, would have been horrified by the violence and criminality, would have insisted on doing things properly, even if properly meant losing. But that auditor had died somewhere between Lagos and Seoul. What remained was someone harder, more practical. Someone who understood that surviving sometimes required becoming the thing you'd spent your life opposing. I think, Naomi said carefully, I want to help people like Elizabeth Okonkwo get their money back. I want to make sure Damien's victims see justice. And if that means working outside traditional boundaries with your grandmother's resources, yes, I think I want that. Jaemin took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses from violence and books in equal measure. She'll demand complete loyalty, total commitment. You become part of the family, you accept all the obligations that come with it. I know. And someday she'll ask you to do something that crosses lines you can't uncross. Something that makes today look tame. Can you live with that? Naomi turned to face him fully. This man who'd started as a convenient visa solution and become something she couldn't quite define. Partner, protector, accomplice. Maybe more than any of those things if she let herself admit it. Can you? She asked. You walked away once. Tried to be someone different. Does being pulled back into this world destroy that person you wanted to be? He was quiet for a long moment, watching police process the accident scene and paramedics tend to injuries and bureaucracy consume the aftermath of violence. I thought leaving made me better, noble, like I could just decide to stop being dangerous and it would be true. But watching you hunted, seeing Damien hurt you, I realized I'm not better when I pretend I'm not what I am. I'm just less useful. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm dangerous, Naomi. I've hurt people, killed people. Those things don't disappear because I stock bookshelves and make coffee. But maybe I can use that darkness for something that matters. Protecting someone who actually deserves protection. Fighting for something beyond territory and money. That's very romantic for someone who just committed multiple felonies. I'm a man of many contradictions. Despite everything, the exhaustion, fear, moral compromise, and complete upheaval of everything she'd once believed about justice. Naomi laughed. Not hysterically, just genuine amusement that bubbled up from somewhere she didn't know still existed. We're disasters, she said. Both of us. Absolutely. But we're disasters together. That has to count for something. Police finally cleared them to leave. Minseo had already arranged transportation, different vehicles, no diplomatic plates this time, and they reconvened at a location far from the expressway chaos. Madame Kang looked no worse for wear despite orchestrating a vehicular assault in morning traffic. If anything, she seemed energized. Mr. Mercer is in proper custody, she announced to the assembled family. The confession video is secure, and Miss Vale's testimony, while complicated by today's events, remains viable with proper legal management. This situation, improbable as it seems, has resolved favorably. What happens now? Naomi asked. Now we ensure Damien Mercer's prosecution proceeds without interference. I have contacts who will monitor the case. Make certain no convenient accidents befall the prisoner. No sudden evidence disappearances. No judges or prosecutors mysteriously changing their minds. The old woman's expression was serene. Justice will be served, slowly, bureaucratically, but completely. And the victims? The people he stole from? Asset recovery specialists are already working on that. The confession provided access to accounts we couldn't reach before. Most of the stolen funds are recoverable. Within 6 months, maybe 8, restitution payments will begin. Not everything, some money's gone forever, but enough that lives can be rebuilt. Naomi felt something release in her chest. Not triumph, just bone-deep relief that maybe, possibly, the damage could be partially undone. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, child. I haven't told you my price. Madame Kang's smile was sharp. You wanted justice. I delivered it. Now you owe me. Not money, not service, loyalty. You're part of this family now, truly. And that means when I call, you come. When I need your particular skills, you provide them. Understood? This was the moment. The place where Naomi either accepted complete entanglement with organized crime or tried to walk away and pretend today never happened. She thought about Elizabeth Okonkwo finally receiving restitution, about Damien behind bars where he couldn't hurt anyone else, about the impossible victory that had only been possible by abandoning every principle she'd once thought defined her. "Understood," Naomi said. "I'm in, whatever that means." "Good." Madam Kang turned to Jae Min. "And you, grandson, are you ready to stop pretending you're not mine, to accept the responsibilities you were born to carry?" Jae Min looked at Naomi, then back at his grandmother. "If Naomi stays, I stay. We're a package now. You want her loyalty, you get both of us. On our terms." "Your terms?" The old woman's laugh was musical and dangerous. "How bold! Tell me these terms you're proposing." "We work for the family, but only operations that help people. Anti-corruption investigations, asset recovery for fraud victims, going after criminals who prey on vulnerable populations, no territory disputes, no protection rackets, no violence for profit." "You want to turn my organization into heroes?" Madam Kang's expression was unreadable. "How naive. I want to be useful without becoming a monster. Is that naive?" The old woman studied her grandson for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. "Very well. I'll permit this experiment. You and Miss Vale will handle special operations, the cases where traditional methods fail and creative solutions become necessary, and in exchange, I'll redirect certain family activities toward more legitimate enterprises, gradually, carefully, because even old women can evolve when properly motivated." She turned to address the assembled family members. "Let this be understood by all. Jaemin Kong and Naomi Vale are under my personal protection. They answer directly to me. Their operations have full family support, and anyone who interferes with their work answers to me personally." The weight of that statement settled over everyone like physical pressure. An old woman in traditional dress declaring that two relative outsiders had her absolute backing meant more than any contract or legal document. It meant survival, protection, and obligations that would reshape their lives completely. Police investigation of the port shooting took 2 more days. Naomi gave testimony that was carefully truthful about everything except the parts that would incriminate Madam Kang's organization and anything beyond self-defense. Agent Chen coordinated with Korean authorities, international prosecutors, and the various jurisdictions where Damien's crimes had occurred. The legal machinery ground forward, slowly, but moving. On the 3rd day, Naomi received a letter. Handwritten. Mailed from Nigeria. She recognized the return address. Elizabeth Okonkwo's home in Lagos. Her hand shook as she opened it. "Dear Miss Vale, I received notification that funds from my pension account have been recovered and will be returned within the year. I do not know how this happened. I do not know if you were involved, but I wanted to write and tell you that I prayed every night that someone would make this right, that someone would care about an old teacher who lost everything. If you had any part in this miracle, thank you. You have given me hope when I had none left. May you find peace in whatever battles you face." Elizabeth Okonkwo. Naomi sat in the rebuilt bookstore, Phoenix Books, already getting its first inventory of novels and coffee equipment, and cried until she had nothing left. Jae Min found her an hour later, still holding the letter, mascara-streaked and exhausted. He didn't ask what happened, just pulled her close and let her cry against his shoulder until the tears finally stopped and something like peace settled over the wreckage of who they used to be. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "We did," he agreed quietly. "Now comes the harder part." "What's harder than the last 3 days?" "Living with what we became to get here." Naomi pulled back and looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd evolved from convenient fake husband into someone she trusted with her life and her soul, despite knowing exactly how dangerous he was. "Can we do that? Live with it?" "I don't know, but I think we have to try." Outside, Seoul moved endlessly through its rhythms. Rain threatened but hadn't started yet. Neon signs flickered to life as dusk approached. Somewhere in the city, Damien Mercer sat in a cell awaiting prosecution. Somewhere else, Madam Kang coordinated operations that existed in the space between law and chaos. And in Phoenix Books, 2 people who'd found each other through desperation began the slow process of building something resembling normal from the ruins of everything they'd destroyed. It wasn't redemption. Not really. But it was survival. And some days survival was enough. 3 weeks after Damian Mercer's arrest, Naomi woke to the sound of rain hammering Seoul like it had personal business to settle. The sound was familiar now, comforting even, in the way trauma survivors sometimes found peace in the things that used to terrify them. She lay in the darkness of the bedroom above Phoenix books and listened to water sheet against windows while Jaemin's breathing stayed slow and even beside her. They'd stopped pretending the marriage was fake somewhere between the warehouse rescue and the expressway assault. Never discussed it, never made it official beyond what already existed on paper. Just gradually stopped sleeping in separate rooms and started existing in the same space like two broken things that fit together better than either had alone. The bookstore was different now, still small, still cramped, but the shelves held books Jaemin actually wanted to sell, instead of whatever random inventory he'd accumulated as camouflage for his quiet life. Korean literature, African writers, true crime that made Naomi uncomfortable in ways she couldn't articulate, and a small section in the back labeled financial ethics that mostly gathered dust but felt necessary somehow. She dressed quietly and went downstairs to make coffee. The espresso machine was new. Madame Kang had sent it as a housewarming gift with a note that said, "For when you need to stay awake for family business." The implication that they'd be working late nights on operations for the Kang organization wasn't subtle. Neither was the reminder that they were owned now in ways that couldn't be undone with paperwork. The coffee was bitter and perfect. Naomi stood at the window watching Seoul wake up through rain and thought about Elizabeth Okonkwo's letter. She'd read it probably 50 times, memorizing every word, using it as evidence that maybe the moral compromises had been worth something. Her phone buzzed. Text from Minseo. "Grandmother wants to see you both. 10 a.m. Don't be late." No context, no explanation, just the summons that meant dropping everything because when Madame Hyejin Kong called, you came. That was the price of protection, the obligation that came with belonging. Jaemin appeared in the doorway, hair messy from sleep, wearing the wire-rimmed glasses he'd reclaimed from wherever he'd stashed them during the violent weeks. He looked like the bookstore owner again, harmless, gentle, the mask back in place. "Grandmother?" he asked. 10 a.m. Wonderful. He poured himself coffee and grimaced at the taste. Still making it too strong. "You drink it anyway." "Because I'm polite." He settled into the reading chair by the window, his spot, where he spent hours with novels and weak tea pretending the world outside didn't exist. "Any idea what this is about?" "When do we ever know with her?" "Fair point." They finished coffee in comfortable silence, showered, dressed in clothes that split the difference between bookstore casual and meeting the crime matriarch formal. By 9:30, they were in Jaemin's car heading north through rain that showed no signs of stopping, leaving the bookstore locked with a sign that said back by 3 p.m. that probably nobody would read. The Kang compound looked different in daylight, less fortress, more traditional estate. The gardens were immaculate despite the rain, pine trees perfectly pruned, stone paths swept clean, everything maintained with the kind of obsessive attention that came from unlimited resources and very specific standards. They were shown to a different building this time, not the main house, something smaller tucked behind ornamental ponds and carefully positioned rocks. Inside was a single large room with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out on rain-soaked gardens. Madame Kang sat at a low table, wearing another traditional hanbok, pouring tea with movements so precise they looked choreographed. Minseo was there too, laptop open, professional demeanor firmly in place. And someone else, a man Naomi didn't recognize. Late 40s, expensive suit, the kind of neutral expression that suggested either law enforcement or organized crime, which in Korea sometimes occupied the same space. "Sit," Madame Kang said without preamble. "We have much to discuss and limited time." They sat. The man studied them both with analytical precision, like he was cataloging weaknesses for future exploitation. "This is Mr. Park," Madame Kang continued. "He represents certain government interests that occasionally align with my own. He has a proposal I think you should hear." Park opened a folder and slid photographs across the table. Crime scenes, financial documents, what looked like surveillance photos of people Naomi didn't know. "Are you familiar with the Busan port corruption scandal?" Naomi shook her head. Jamin said quietly, smuggling operation. Customs officials taking bribes to look the other way while contraband moves through. Been ongoing for maybe 5 years. 6, Park corrected. And it's not just contraband, human trafficking, weapons, narcotics. Billions of won moving through corrupted channels while legitimate businesses suffer and criminal organizations profit. He tapped one of the photos. This man is the architect, Young Tae-won, former customs director, currently living very well on money he stole from the system he was supposed to protect. The parallels to Damian Mercer were obvious, too obvious. Naomi looked at Madame Kang. Why are you telling us this? Because Mr. Park's organization has been investigating Young for 3 years with minimal success. He's protected by officials, he's compromised. Evidence mysteriously disappears, witnesses recant testimony. The conventional approach isn't working. The old woman's smile was sharp. He needs someone willing to work outside conventional boundaries, someone with recent experience exposing corruption through creative means. You want us to do to Young what we did to Damien, Jae-min said flatly. I want you to consider it. Mr. Park has resources, legal authority when needed, and unlike the Damien situation, this would be coordinated with government oversight, sanctioned, even if unofficially. Park leaned forward. You'd be contractors, paid well, protected legally through channels I can activate. Your methods would be flexible. I won't ask you to follow procedures that don't work, but I need results. And Madame Kang suggested you're uniquely qualified to provide them. Naomi felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was the obligation Madame Kang had mentioned, the price of protection and belonging. Not just one job, but the expectation of many, becoming fixers for cases where the system failed and someone needed to get their hands dirty. And if we refuse? She asked. Then you refuse, Madame Kang said simply. I won't force this on you, but understand that refusing means losing certain protections. Mr. Park's organization has been very helpful in managing the legal aftermath of recent events. If that cooperation ends, you may find complications arising. Nothing dramatic, just bureaucratic difficulties that make life challenging. The threat wasn't subtle. Work for us or lose the safety net keeping you from prosecution. Jae-min's expression had gone carefully neutral, the look he wore when processing information that required weighing multiple terrible options. How much time do we have to decide? Naomi asked. 72 hours, Park said. After that, I move on to other options, less preferable options, but available. He stood, collected his folder, and departed without further conversation. Efficient, professional. The kind of government operator who'd learned to work in shadows because that's where real power lived. Minseo closed her laptop once Park was gone. For what it's worth, Grandmother wouldn't have brought this to you if she didn't think it was something you could handle. And the money is substantial, enough to expand the bookstore significantly, buy property, build something lasting. Blood money, Naomi said quietly. All money is blood money if you trace it back far enough. Minseo's expression was sympathetic but firm. The question is whether you're willing to get your hands dirty to stop people who hurt others. You already answered that with Damien. This is just asking if you'll do it again. They left the compound in silence, rain still falling, Seoul stretching endlessly in all directions. Jae-min drove mechanically, lost in thought. Naomi stared out the window and tried to organize her feelings into something coherent. She'd thought beating Damien would be the end, victory achieved, justice served, move on with life. But that was naive. There was no moving on. There was just the choice of whether to keep fighting or pretend the problem didn't exist. What do you think? She asked finally. Jae-min was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think my grandmother is right that we're good at this. Exposing corruption. Going after people who prey on the vulnerable. We proved that with Damien. But I also think once we start doing this professionally, we become what we fought against. Just a different flavor of criminal. Better motivated, maybe. But still operating outside the law. Still making decisions about who deserves punishment without oversight or accountability. So you want to refuse? I didn't say that. He glanced at her briefly before returning attention to the road. I want to know what you want. This affects you as much as me. Maybe more. You're the one who has to live with becoming someone who uses illegal methods to achieve moral goals. That's a heavy weight, Naomi. She thought about Elizabeth Okonkwo's letter, about Damien behind bars where he couldn't hurt anyone else, about the victims who'd finally see restitution because someone had been willing to break rules that protected predators. I want to help people, she said quietly. That's what I've always wanted. When I became an auditor, it was because I thought catching fraud would protect people from being hurt. And I failed at that, completely. Got so focused on process and procedure that I missed obvious corruption right in front of me. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I signed off on Damien's accounts, gave them my approval, helped him steal from hundreds of people because I was too comfortable, too trusting, too certain that the system would catch anything I missed. She turned to face him. I don't want to make that mistake again. If the system isn't working, if conventional approaches leave criminals protected, then maybe working outside the system is the only moral choice left. Or maybe it's just rationalization for becoming exactly what we claim to oppose. Maybe. Naomi's hands were shaking, but I'd rather try and fail than do nothing and watch more people get hurt. They made it back to the bookstore in time to open for the afternoon rush that never materialized. 3 customers total in 4 hours. A student buying used textbooks. An elderly woman who spent an hour reading poetry without purchasing anything. A businessman who asked if they carried English legal thrillers and left disappointed when the answer was no. Not enough revenue to sustain a business. Certainly not enough to build anything lasting. They were surviving on the money Madame Kang had provided after Damien's arrest, payment for services rendered, though nobody used those words directly. Jae Min was shelving inventory when his phone rang. He answered, listened for maybe 30 seconds, and his expression went completely flat. When? Where? I understand. We'll be there in an hour. He hung up and looked at Naomi with eyes that had gone hollow. That was the hospital. My father collapsed in custody. Heart attack. They're not sure he'll make it through the night. The drive to Seoul Metropolitan Hospital took 40 minutes through evening traffic. Jae Min drove in complete silence, hands tight on the wheel, jaw clenched so hard Naomi could see muscles jumping under his skin. She wanted to say something comforting, but had no idea what comfort looked like for someone heading to maybe watch their father die after years of mutual hatred. The hospital corridors smelled like antiseptic and desperation. They found the intensive care unit where Jae Min's father lay hooked to machines that beeped with mechanical regularity. 2 guards stood outside, not hospital security, Kang family members, ensuring the patriarch didn't have any convenient accidents while vulnerable. Madame Kang sat in a chair by the window, still wearing her traditional hanbok, hands folded precisely in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile, age showing through in ways it usually didn't. Is he awake? Jae Min asked. In and out. The doctors say the next few hours are critical. If he stabilizes, he'll likely recover. If not, she trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. What happened? Stress, poor health, the consequences of living violently for 40 years. Madame Kang's voice was softer than Naomi had ever heard it. Your father was never good at managing his emotions. He carried rage like other people carry identification. Eventually, it consumed him. He betrayed us, fed information to Damien, nearly got Naomi killed. Yes, he did all those things. The old woman stood slowly, moving like her joints hurt in ways she usually hid. And now he's dying. And despite everything he did, he's still my son, still your father. And I thought you should have the chance to say goodbye. Or not. That choice is yours. She left the room, taking the guards with her, leaving Jae Min alone with the decision. He stood in the doorway for maybe 3 minutes, just staring at the man in the hospital bed. Finally, he said to Naomi, "You don't have to stay for this." "I know, I'm staying anyway." They entered together. Jae Min's father looked diminished by illness, the powerful enforcer reduced to a frail shape under white sheets, breathing with assistance from machines. His eyes were closed. For a moment, Naomi thought he was unconscious. Then he spoke without opening them. "So you came. Surprised. Thought you'd let me die alone." "Grandmother thought I should be here." Jae Min's voice was carefully neutral. "Dutiful grandson. Always doing what she wants, even when you pretend you're not." The elder Kang's voice was weak but still carried edge. "That's your problem, boy. Can't decide if you want to be part of this family or above it, so you end up being neither. I came to see if you had any last words that weren't insults. Apparently not. Wait." His father's eyes finally opened, roomy, bloodshot, but still sharp with intelligence that hadn't been dulled by physical failure. "You want last words? Fine. I was wrong about you. Jaemin froze. What? I called you a coward for leaving, said you were wasting your potential selling books. I was wrong. Each word seemed to cost him effort. You found a way to be strong without becoming a monster. Used your training to protect someone instead of hurt them. That's harder than what I did. Takes more courage than just following orders and breaking whoever your mother pointed at. I don't understand. You betrayed us to hurt me. I betrayed you because I was angry and stupid and couldn't accept that my son was better than me. He coughed, machine alarms beeping urgently before settling. Damian Mercer offered me money to inform on family operations. Said he'd expose Mother's criminal activities and force you to come back. Take your rightful place. I thought if you lost everything else, you'd have to be what I needed you to be. You nearly got my wife killed. I know, and I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth. His eyes shifted to Naomi. You, the auditor, I don't know you, but my son chose you over his family, over power and tradition and everything he was born to inherit. That means something. Means he sees value I'm too broken to recognize. Mr. Kang, Naomi started. Let me finish. Don't have much time. His breathing was getting worse. My son, listen. You're not a coward. You're not a disappointment. You're just better. Better than me. Better than what this family usually produces. Don't let Mother turn you into what I became. Stay yourself, even if it means staying apart. He closed his eyes. The machines beeped steadily. A nurse appeared in the doorway, checked vitals, and departed without speaking. The moment stretched. I forgive you, Jaemin said quietly. I don't forget. Can't forget. But I forgive you anyway. Because carrying hatred is exhausting, and I'm tired of being angry at someone who's already destroying himself. His father's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Smart. Stronger than me in every way that matters. He died 4 hours later. Quietly. No dramatic final moment. Just gradual cessation as organs failed and machines recorded the process with clinical precision. Madame Kang made arrangements with the kind of efficient professionalism that came from burying too many family members over 40 years. Jaemin sat in the hospital chair and stared at nothing while Naomi held his hand and wished she had words that would help. She didn't. Some pain couldn't be fixed with language. The funeral was 3 days later, small, private. Just family and a few close associates who'd known Jaemin's father during his operational years. They burned incense and said traditional words that felt hollow but were necessary anyway because ritual gave structure to grief that had no structure otherwise. Naomi stood beside Jaemin throughout and watched him process emotions he'd spent years suppressing. Not crying, just existing in the space between relief and sorrow that came from losing someone you'd hated who you'd also loved beneath the hatred. After the ceremony, Madame Kang approached them both. She looked older than Naomi had ever seen her. Grief had finally cracked the armor of control she usually maintained. My son and I disagreed about many things, but he was right about you, Jaemin. You are better, and I should have told him that before he died angry. He knew, Jaemin said. At the end, I think he knew. Perhaps. She placed one hand on her grandson's arm, rare physical contact from a woman who usually maintained careful distance. I'm releasing you from the obligation I mentioned, the work Mr. Park proposed. You don't have to do it, either of you. You've paid enough already in blood and compromise. If you want to just run your bookstore and live quietly, I won't stop you. The offer hung in the air like smoke. Freedom. Permission to walk away from the darkness that had consumed Jaemin's father and build something clean instead. Everything he'd wanted when he first left the family business. We accept, Naomi said. Madame Kang's eyes shifted to her. You accept what? Mr. Park's proposal, the Busan investigation, whatever other cases need people willing to work outside conventional boundaries. Naomi felt Jaemin's surprise but didn't look at him, kept her eyes on the old woman. Your son was right that Jaemin is better. But better doesn't mean useless. It means capable of doing hard things without losing himself. And I'm tired of watching predators win because good people are too ethical to fight dirty. Naomi, Jaemin started. We're good at this, she continued, exposing corruption, going after people who hurt the vulnerable. We proved that with Damien. And there are hundreds more like him, thousands. People who exploit systematic failures and hide behind legal protections. If we can stop even some of them, help even some of their victims, isn't that worth the moral compromise? Madame Kang studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, she smiled. You've become dangerous, Miss Vale. Not physically, but in ways that matter more. Very well. If you're truly willing, I'll contact Mr. Park, but understand this commitment is binding. Once you start down this path, it becomes very difficult to stop. I understand. They left the funeral grounds in Jae-min's car. He didn't speak for the first 10 minutes, just drove mechanically while processing what Naomi had committed them to. Finally, he pulled over at a rest stop overlooking Seoul and turned to face her. Why? His voice carried exhaustion rather than anger. Why accept something I was trying to protect you from? Because you need this. Maybe don't want to admit it, but you need purpose beyond selling books and pretending you're normal. Your father was right. You're better. But better doesn't mean safe. It means capable of choosing to use power for something meaningful. And you think targeting corrupt officials is meaningful? I think helping people like Elizabeth Okonkwo is meaningful. I think stopping predators who hide behind legal protections is meaningful. And I think doing it together, making sure we don't lose ourselves in the process, that's the only way either of us survives what we're becoming. Jae-min was quiet, staring out at Seoul sprawling endlessly in all directions. City of 10 million people living their lives with no idea that two broken individuals were discussing becoming professional criminals in the name of justice. Finally, he said, My father spent his life hurting people for money. Became a monster because he never questioned whether what he was doing was right. How do we make sure we don't end up the same? By questioning everything, by choosing targets carefully, by making sure we only go after people who genuinely deserve it. Naomi took his hand. And by having each other. Someone to pull us back when we go too far. Someone who remembers who we were before the violence. That's a lot of faith in two people who've already proven they're willing to break laws when convenient. It's all the faith I have. It'll have to be enough. They sat in silence watching the city while rain started again, gentle this time, not the violent downpour that had marked the beginning of their partnership. Just steady precipitation that made everything look softer, more forgiving. Okay, Jae-min said finally. We do this, together, but we set boundaries. We document everything we do so there's accountability. And the moment either of us thinks we're becoming what we're fighting against, we walk away. Agreed? Agreed. They drove back to Phoenix Books through afternoon traffic. The store was empty when they arrived. No customers, no messages, just quiet space filled with books and the coffee machine Madame Kang had sent. Home. Sanctuary. The place they'd built from ruins of everything they'd destroyed. Over the next 6 months, they took 3 cases from Mr. Park's organization. A customs official in Busan, who was indeed orchestrating smuggling operations. A prosecutor in Daegu, accepting bribes to throw cases. A real estate developer in Incheon using fraudulent accounting to steal from small investors. Each investigation required weeks of careful work, financial analysis, surveillance, evidence gathering. And each ended with exposure, arrest, and restitution for victims. They got good at it, developed methods that balanced illegal investigation with legitimate legal process, built a reputation among certain government circles as the people you called when conventional approaches failed, fixed problems that couldn't be fixed through official channels. The money was substantial, enough to expand Phoenix Books into 3 connected storefronts, enough to hire staff who could run things when Jae-min and Naomi were occupied with investigations. Enough to feel secure in ways neither had experienced before. But the cost accumulated too. Sleepless nights worrying about crossing lines they couldn't uncross. Moral fatigue from constantly operating in ethical gray spaces. The slow erosion of believing anything was truly right or wrong instead of just convenient or necessary. One evening, 9 months after Damien's arrest, Naomi sat in the bookstore after closing and found herself reading Elizabeth Okonkwo's letter for probably the 100th time. The paper was worn from handling, creased from being folded and unfolded repeatedly. Jae-min found her there and sat beside her without speaking. They'd developed that kind of communication, silence that said more than words. Understanding built from shared trauma and moral compromise and the strange intimacy of surviving together. Do you think we're good people? Naomi asked quietly. He considered that question seriously. I think we're people trying to do good things using questionable methods. Whether that makes us good, I honestly don't know anymore. Your father called you better, said you found a way to be strong without becoming a monster. He said that when he was dying. Might have just been delirium, or it might have been truth he couldn't admit when he was healthy. Naomi set down the letter carefully. I used to think morality was simple, right and wrong clearly delineated. Follow the rules and justice happens naturally. Now I think morality is just choices. Constant choices between bad options, and we have to live with whatever we choose. That's a depressing philosophy. It's a realistic one. She leaned against him, feeling his warmth and solidity. Do you regret it? Any of this? Every day. And also not at all. Both things true simultaneously. Jaemin's arm came around her shoulders. I regret the violence, the illegal methods, the way we've compromised ourselves. But I don't regret keeping you alive. Don't regret helping Elizabeth Okonkwo and people like her. Don't regret building something together that matters more than safety. That's very poetic for someone who traffics in moral ambiguity. I contain multitudes. She laughed quietly, found his hand and laced their fingers together. Outside, Seoul moved endlessly through its rhythms. Inside Phoenix Books, two people who'd found each other in the ruins of corruption and violence sat together and accepted that redemption wasn't possible. Survival was. Making amends was. Trying to help more than they hurt was. That would have to be enough. A year after Damien's arrest, Naomi received another letter from Nigeria. Different handwriting this time, younger, more energetic. Dear Miss Vale, my name is Grace Okonkwo. I am Elizabeth Okonkwo's granddaughter. I wanted to write and tell you that my grandmother passed away last month. Peacefully, in her sleep, after getting to see her savings restored and knowing she could help pay for my university education. She asked me to write you if anything happened to her. She wanted you to know that getting her money back gave her 3 good years. 3 years where she didn't have to worry. 3 years where she felt valued. She said you gave her that gift when no one else cared enough to try. Thank you for fighting for an old woman nobody else remembered. Grace Okonkwo. Naomi read the letter 3 times before the tears started. Not sad tears exactly. Something more complicated, grief and relief and the bone-deep exhaustion of knowing that all the moral compromise and violence and illegal methods had, in the end, given one elderly teacher 3 good years. Was that worth it? Was 3 years of peace for one person worth becoming what they'd become? She honestly didn't know, but she thought maybe it was. Jaemin found her crying in their bedroom above the bookstore and pulled her close without asking why. He'd learned to read her moods, knew when silence helped more than questions. They stayed like that until the tears stopped and something like peace settled over the wreckage of who they used to be. Elizabeth Okonkwo died, Naomi said finally. Her granddaughter wrote to tell me. I'm sorry. Don't be. She died happy, got 3 good years after getting her money back. That's more than she would have had if we'd done nothing. Jaemin was quiet for a moment. Then, is that enough? 3 good years for one person in exchange for everything we sacrificed to get here? I don't know. Ask me again in 10 years. Maybe by then I'll have an answer. They held each other while rain started again outside. Seoul's constant companion, washing streets clean temporarily before pollution, and life made them dirty again. Endless cycle. Eternal rhythm. The city breathed and they breathed with it. 2 people who'd chosen to fight corruption from inside the darkness because that's where corruption lived. Not heroes, not villains, just survivors trying to help others survive in a world that didn't particularly care whether anyone made it through intact. 5 years after Damien Mercer's arrest, Phoenix Books had expanded into one of Seoul's most respected independent bookstores. 4 connected storefronts, staff of 12, regular author events, a coffee shop that actually made money. The legitimate face of Jaemin and Naomi's life, while the other work, the investigations, the cases, the operations that couldn't be discussed publicly, happened in shadows. They'd handled maybe 30 cases in those 5 years. Corruption, fraud, abuse of power, each one carefully chosen, each one documented, each one haunting them in small ways that accumulated like interest on debt. But the victims they'd helped numbered in thousands. Money restored, justice served, people who'd been invisible finally seen by a system that usually ignored anyone without power. Naomi stood in the bookstore one morning and realized something extraordinary. She wasn't checking locks compulsively anymore. wasn't scanning crowds for threats, wasn't living in constant fear that Damien or someone like him would appear and destroy everything she'd built. She was just living, existing in the world without terror as constant companion. Not safe, exactly, but no longer prey. Jaemin found her at the window, staring out at Seoul moving endlessly beneath gray sky. "You look thoughtful." "I was thinking about how far we've come, how different everything is from that night in the café when this all started." "Different good or different bad?" "Both, simultaneously." She turned to face him. This man who'd started as a convenient visa solution and become everything. Partner, accomplice, the only person alive who understood exactly what they'd sacrificed and why. "I'm not the person I was, can't ever be that person again. And I think I'm okay with that." "Are you? Really?" "Because I wake up some nights and wonder if we're just well-intentioned criminals who've convinced ourselves we're heroes." "Maybe we are, but we're also people who help others when the system fails them. That has to count for something." She moved closer, close enough to see the silver threading through his hair that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Evidence of stress and time and everything they'd endured. "Your father said you were better." "I think he was right, but not because you're not dangerous, because you're dangerous and choose not to be. Every single day you wake up and choose to use power carefully. That's what makes you better." "And you? What does it make you?" "A woman who stole evidence and ran for 18 months and ended up exactly where she needed to be, with exactly who she needed." Naomi took his hand, felt the calluses that came from both violence and books. "I don't know if we're good people, Jaemin. I don't know if the things we've done are forgivable. But I know we've helped people who had nowhere else to turn, and I think maybe that's the only morality that matters." He pulled her close, and they stood together in the morning light of Phoenix books while Seoul woke up outside. Rain threatened but hadn't started yet. The coffee machine hissed steam. Somewhere in the stacks a customer browsed quietly, oblivious to the history these walls contained. "I love you," Jaemin said quietly. "Should have said it years ago. Keep meaning to, but the timing never feels right." "Timing's never right for anything important." Naomi pressed her forehead against his. "I love you too. Have for a while now. Just kept thinking I shouldn't. That loving someone I'd met through trauma was probably unhealthy. But turns out love doesn't care about health. It just happens." They kissed there in the bookstore while morning commuters rushed past outside and Seoul breathed around them, and the world continued its eternal indifference to individual human stories. Not a fairy tale ending, not redemption, not absolution for everything they'd done and become, just two broken people who'd found each other in the ruins and decided that surviving together was better than surviving alone. That evening, Naomi sat at the desk in their bedroom and wrote a letter. Not to Elizabeth Okonkwo, she was gone, but to Grace, the granddaughter pursuing education with money that had been stolen and recovered and finally returned. "Dear Grace, thank you for writing to tell me about your grandmother. I'm glad she had those 3 years. Glad she knew her savings were restored before she passed. That knowledge means more to me than I can adequately express. Your grandmother once wrote me saying she'd prayed for someone to make things right. I don't know much about prayers, but I know about fighting, about refusing to accept that powerful people can hurt vulnerable ones without consequence. And I know that sometimes fighting requires becoming something you're not proud of. Crossing lines, making compromises, doing questionable things for good reasons. I hope you never have to make those choices. I hope you live in a world where the system works and justice happens naturally, and good people don't have to become gray people to achieve anything meaningful. But if you do face those choices someday, remember your grandmother. Remember that she mattered enough for someone to fight for her. And remember that doing the right thing rarely looks as clean as we wish it would. Take care of yourself. Study hard. Build something beautiful with the opportunities her sacrifice and restoration gave you. With respect, Naomi Vale." She sealed the letter and set it aside to mail tomorrow. Then she joined Jaemin downstairs where he was closing the bookstore for the night, turning off lights, straightening shelves, the ritual they'd performed together hundreds of times. "Ready?" he asked. "Always." They locked the door and stepped into Seoul's evening. Rain had started finally, gentle precipitation that made everything glow under streetlights and neon signs. They walked home together through the rain, Two people who'd survived corruption and violence and moral compromise and come out the other side changed but intact. Not heroes, not villains, just human, complicated, trying their best in a complicated world. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. Seoul breathed around them endlessly. The city that had witnessed their transformation from prey to predator to something in between. The city where Naomi Vale had stopped running and started fighting. Where Jae Min Kong had learned that being better didn't mean being harmless. Rain fell on clean and dirty alike. The eternal rhythm. The endless cycle. And in a small bookstore called Phoenix Books, rising from the ashes of everything they'd destroyed to build it, two survivors finally stopped looking over their shoulders, finally stopped waiting for the next disaster, finally started believing that maybe, possibly, the worst was behind them and what remained was just life. Imperfect, complicated, stained with compromise and questionable choices, but theirs. And after everything they'd endured to get here, that was more than enough.